Sound check, Public Works Committee, sound check, Public Works Committee, sound check, sound check.
Welcome to the Public Works Committee scheduled for today, March 20th. A reminder that, for those of us, committee members who are joining online to indicate your speaking request, and I apologize because the chair's note doesn't have the usual preamble, but yeah, hi, we're starting. Moving along, Councillor McMeekin and Pauls are hosting a group of students from Covenant Teachers College. You all will be, I think, in attendance. Are they in attendance? Not yet, so they will be in attendance at some point. Councillor Pauls has requested to be able to acknowledge them when they come in, but nonetheless, we're going to move on with the agenda as is before committee members. So that said, may I please, Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there are changes to the agenda today. Number 6. Number 6, delegation requests. 6.2, delegation requests respecting item 12.1, motion respecting review of level of service for winter control in alignment with the principles of Vision Zero for today's meeting.
Thank you.
And the delegations are A, Asniv Malat, and B, Tim Nolan, Accessibility Hamilton Alliance. Number 13, notices of motion, playground improvements at Henry and Beatrice Warden Park, 55 Lake Avenue North, Hamilton, Ward 5. 13.2, pathway improvements at Sam Manson Park, 80 Nash Road North, Hamilton, Ward 5. And item 13.3, Ottawa Street North and Maple Avenue pedestrian crossing, Wards 3 and 4. And number 14, general information, other business. 14.1, amendments to the outstanding business list. B, items requiring a new date. A, municipal class environmental assessment and conceptual design of Ancaster elevated water reservoir. Item on OBL AAP, current due date June 2023, proposed new due date Q4 2024. B, results of Park Security Patrol Pilot Program. Item on OBL is ABG, current due date Q1 2023, proposed new due date May 1st, 2023. Management of the aviary at 85 Oak Knoll Drive. Item on OBL AAY, current due date Q1 2023, proposed new due date Q2 2023. Security report on theft and vandalism prevention in city-owned spaces, results of 2-year pilot program. Item on OBL ADC, current due date February 15th, 2023, proposed new due date May 1st, 2023. And E, update to Parks Bylaw 01219, item on OBL ADK, current due date Q1 2023, proposed new due date August 16th, 2023.
Thank you for those changes. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Thank you. Councillor Francis, and seconded by Councillor Spadafora. Thank you both. Electronic vote, please. Otherwise indicate by thumb. Councillors, could you please indicate your vote in approving the amended agenda, please? Councillor Pauls? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest. Any at this point to declare for the committee meeting, colleagues? Seeing none, if you can now, Councillor Pauls, I'll afford you literally 2 minutes. We're kind of moving along in the agenda. So if you could take a moment to acknowledge our guests in the chamber.
Yes, I will gladly acknowledge our guests. It was a privilege to meet with Covenant Teachers College today. It's in Ward 7, which I love. And I want to introduce Dr. Christine Van Halen Faber, principal of Covenant Canadian Reformed Teachers College. We had a great conversation in room 264. And I just had a great time with them talking and with my counselor Ted here, and thank you for sitting in our Public Works. It's very interesting. You might not stay all day, but thank you for being here, and again, thanks again. But thanks.
Thank you for being in attendance. May you have a riveting experience here at Public Works Committee. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Thank you of the previous meeting of February 13th. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any discussion on the minutes? You're like, nice try. Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we are looking for your vote, please. Both affirmative votes from Councillor Pauls and McMeekin. Thank you. Moving on to communication items 5.1, Citizen Committee Member Resignations for the Hamilton Cycling Committee. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive the resignations? Are there any liaison members from the committee here? No Cycling Committee liaison members in Public Works? Really? Okay. Who wants to move the resignations then? Councillor Wilson, Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Thank you both. Oh, Councillor Wilson, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to seek confirmation through you from clerks that we are still in the practice of sending a letter of thanks to all those who give of their time and their insight to the advisory committees and when they leave. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Wilson, I can ensure that the staff liaison has that on his list of things to do.
Thank you. So it's before committee, moved and seconded. Please vote. And Councillors Pauls and McMeekin, affirmative?
Yep.
Thank you. Moving on to delegation requests. 6.1 is Mandy Smith, respecting the logistics of maintaining alleys in the Barton, Cannon, Birch, Sherman grid for today's meeting. 6.2 is delegation request respecting item 12.1, motion respecting review of level of service for winter control in alignment with the principles of Vision Zero. For today's meeting, we have Asneen Mallet and Tim Nolan from Accessibility Hamilton Alliance. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation requests for today's meeting? Moved by Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Any discussion on the requests for today's meeting and additions? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. Thank you, and those delegation requests for today have been approved. So moving on to delegations, members are reminded that questions of delegations are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. We'll hear all of the delegations and then vote to receive them in totality. So first up, we have 7.1, Angela Zen, respecting funding for a staircase to facilitate access to commuter trail connecting University Gardens and Westdale. Hi, welcome, and if you want to say good afternoon, we'll make sure your mic is on. And we encourage you to just adjust the microphone so that it's nice and clear in front of your face.
Good afternoon.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Hi, so thank you for taking the time to hear my request. So I'm going to be requesting a staircase on the path from University Gardens to McMaster University. So to be clear, we're requesting the construction of a steel metal staircase with a bike runnel on the path connecting University Gardens and Grant Boulevard to McMaster University. I also want to emphasize this trail is listed as part of the city's recreational trails master plan, so the city does recognize that this is an important trail. Why do we want this new staircase? This is a key commuter path that is used by pedestrians and cyclists. And for several years, there was a staircase on the trail. It was actually removed last summer by the Hamilton Conservation Authority due to it being in poor condition. The remaining trail, however, runs down a steep slope, and it's quite difficult and unsafe during the wintertime due to ice buildup. And some residents have already informed me that they have fallen on this trail during the wintertime. So the HCA last fall has made some trail improvements, widening the trail, changing the grading slightly, and these are greatly appreciated, but it does not unfortunately solve the ice problem. So I really want to emphasize here that this is not just a leisure trail. This is not a trail that we say, oh, the weather is nice and we're going to go for a walk. This is a trail that people use to go to school and go to work, so we must use this trail even in bad weather. In addition, University Gardens has 2 exit points, one of them which is this path, and the other one which is Osler Drive, which, as you may know, is not cycling or pedestrian friendly. So, to emphasize the importance of this trail, I conducted a survey of residents in University Gardens. We had 165 individuals who responded. And first, we asked residents if they use the trail for commuting and/or leisure purposes. So we see we have almost 80 people who said they use this trail for commuting, and a lot more do say that they also use it for leisure. Second, I wanted to highlight that this trail is an important connection to other parts of Hamilton. So we have 120 people who say they use this to access Coots Drives. So for example, there are some quite good bike trails on Coots Drives. 100 people use this trail to access Westdale. 130 people use this to access McMaster University. Some people said they studied there, but others go there for the gym or to drop their kid off at the daycare. And finally, 48 people use this trail to access Ainsley Wood. So I want to discuss winter maintenance. So here in the map, this blue area is still a trail, but it's on McMaster property, so it's maintained by McMaster, and they do winter maintenance on it. So there's never any ice buildup there. And of course, here is Grant Boulevard. That's maintained by the city, so there's no ice buildup there. So really, it's frustrating for us residents because there's just this small stretch here that just gets covered with ice during the winter, but as soon as we get down to the blue area, everything is maintained, and everything up here is obviously maintained. So we're really just missing this maintenance in this small stretch that would really facilitate our commute. So another thing I want to emphasize is that, as you can see from the data I presented, using this trail to access Ward 1 is very popular. So for people going to McMaster, it would take much longer to drive to McMaster and park there than to walk using the path. And actually from the top of the path, you can actually see the parking lot where you would have to park at. Furthermore, that parking lot at McMaster is already overflowing, and McMaster is actually trying to make the west end of campus more sustainable. This is the main walking trail out of University Gardens. So walking down Osler and Main Street will take much longer. So I've been in touch with someone at McMaster Facilities, and they recognize the importance of this trail, encouraging sustainability, and they're willing to commit up to $15,000 to help with the staircase funding, subject to some conditions, which I'm happy to discuss later. So sort of to sum up, why is this trail so important? So the City of Hamilton as a whole has been promoting green transit and safe access for pedestrians and cyclists. And this is really appreciated, but we want to emphasize that this initiative should not just be for downtown residents. This is our key commuter trail, and it is not safe for us during the winter. We use this trail to access other parts of the city without having to drive, and we need the trail to be safe and accessible all year round. In addition, we do not have access to the new cycling paths built by the city. However, a staircase with a bike runnel would allow us to connect to the bike trails on Coots Drive and throughout the rest of Hamilton. So just to summarize, a new staircase would provide access to McMaster, not only the university, but the GO bus station, and especially when the light rail transit system comes to McMaster, that will be a very important connection for us. People use it to go to the gym, go to daycare, Westdale, Ainsley Wood, Coots Drive. We want to make commuting safe for pedestrians and cyclists. We want to encourage environmentally friendly commuting practices and reduce the need for cars. So please invest in our neighborhood and replace the staircase. As I mentioned, this land is on HCA land, and I'm hoping that the city, with the HCA, plus with support and funding from McMaster, can work together to give us a solution. And lastly, just a few comments from the survey people who responded. For example, someone here says that having this path has kept us from needing a second car. Someone else says, I use this path daily but find it exceedingly treacherous in the winter time. Thank you so much for your time.
Right on time. Thank you very much. Before you leave, colleagues, any questions for our delegate? First up is Councillor A. Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, for coming out. I know we've connected around this issue before, and I think you've made a really great case as to why this is a priority, just so folks in the room understand the work that you and neighbors have been doing to kind of document community interest, like you mentioned the survey. You've already been to HCA, you've emailed city staff before, you've now found funding from McMaster, which was news to me here. Like, you're putting in a lot of work. Would you just be able to summarize for committee, when did your community, when did neighbors start having these conversations, and how long has this work already been going on in community?
Sure. So around last spring, we noticed that the old set of staircases that was on the land was deteriorating. So some of us reached out to the HCA and said, hey, could you replace the set of staircase because it's getting old? And instead, the HCA just removed them, and they said they would not provide funding for a new set of staircases. So then, that was around last spring, so myself and some residents of University Gardens got together because we really recognized how dangerous the trail can be. Several people spoke to us about falling on the trail during wintertime on a commute. So last summer, we've been working on getting the survey. I connected with Alex then, and the HCA, I did do a delegation at the board committee, and they did do some trail maintenance improvements, which is greatly appreciated, but unfortunately just does not solve the problem that it's an ice rink during the winter time. So because of that continuing issue, now I'm back here hoping to get some funding from the city in combination with what I've already gotten committed from McMaster University. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Angela, and through the chair, just really, really grateful for all the work that you've been putting into this for over a year now. I think we all understand that infrastructure projects, public works is not necessarily quick work, but again, just thinking in mind that residents have already been working on this issue for a year. If we moved a motion to move on this today, it's not going to be like the stairs are there tomorrow. There's process pieces here. And so just, I think as we have this discussion, there's a motion coming up later to kind of move this forward. But just as we all have this discussion, so grateful for the year of time, work, organizing, planning, finding funding that yourself and other neighbors have been putting in to take attention to our trails. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
Thank you, Chair Nan, and good to see you again, Angela Zhang, since I was on the board last term, the HCA board. So can you just clarify for me, and I admire your persistence, Angela. I'm trying to remember, I was on the board, full honesty, that we declined your request last term, but I think we directed staff to make some enhancements and improvements. Is not the existing trail, if I recall by the mapping, is it not close to where you want this proposed new stairway through you, Chair Nan? Please, Angela?
Yes, so the existing trail is close to the staircase, but what I'm trying to emphasize, and apologies if I wasn't clear, is that the existing trail, it's a downward steep slope, and during the winter time, if there's snow or freezing rain, it just becomes an ice rink, and it's really quite treacherous to navigate down, and as I said, other residents have told me that they've fallen on that ice rink.
Well, that's not good to hear, but I appreciate you sharing that. And so obviously, I recall the HCA with Chair Nan with limited funds last term. It could have also been a reason why we turned down the request, because it could be ballpark figure, last I recall, maybe somewhere between $100,000 to maybe $300,000. And so I'm intrigued by the McMaster potential contribution. Through you, Chair Nan, Angela, you said it would come though with some conditions. Can you share that, or is that private at this time?
I can share that.
Please.
So McMaster said that they would want to see quotes for, I guess, the estimates, and that they would not do winter maintenance on the trail. So they, with the steel metal staircase, because it's steel and it has the holes in it, so the snow would just fall through. My understanding is that why it's so useful. So those are the conditions from McMaster.
Well, thank you for sharing that too, Angela. And obviously then where Councillor Alex Wilson may be going with a future motion, Chair Nan, at this committee, obviously on HCA owned and controlled lands, it would have to be some form of a legal partnership, especially financially, that would, and I'd love to see where the risks and responsibilities ultimately would lie between all the entities. Thanks for coming in again, Angela. Thank you,
Thank
Chair
you.
Nan.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Jackson, sort of same line questioning. As the HCA, I was on that committee too last term, engaged with the city already? Are they engaging how much it would cost already with the city, or is it too early?
My understanding is, so I have not contacted them again after the board meeting and after they did the trail maintenance, but I would be happy to sort of help liaise, but I haven't been in touch with them.
Okay, I just wondering if the city was aware of it. Obviously they are, but I'm just wondering if they have engaged already with the HCA. So
Right, I think the city knows about the trail because it's on the trail's master plan. So, but other than that, I'm not aware of any other engagement.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. That exhausts our speakers list, and
Thank
thank you for coming today to delegate. Next up, we have 7.2 and followed by 7.3, Brenda Duke from the Gala Community Planning Team. First item that Brenda will be speaking to is respecting to the support for maintenance of gardens within public parks. And then the second item will be waste pickup procedures and support for community cleanups. Good afternoon, Brenda.
Good afternoon.
Just wanted to clarify, you want 5 minutes for each?
Pardon me?
You'd like 5 minutes for each topic?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Okay, please proceed.
Okay. So first of all, I'd just like to clarify that I'm here today as a citizen and not as a member of the Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee. So I'd like to talk about gardens, which is one of my favorite topics, and in particular gardens in public spaces. The Gibson neighborhood is home to two of the larger parks in the area and a green space owned by Hydro One and leased to the city of Hamilton. And they've all been adopted by the Gala planning team. We support 15 pollinator gardens between Birch Avenue and Wellington Street. Powell Park is located at Birch Avenue and bordered by Sturton, Barton, and Harvey Street. Woodlands Park is at 501 Barton between Sanford and Wellington. And the Birch Avenue green space runs from Barton Street down to Princess. Both of the parks have seen improvements and enhancements due to the efforts of the City Adopt a Park program, but the maintenance falls to volunteers who adopted the parks, and specifically the maintenance of the gardens. Both of the parks, there's two substantial gardens at Powell Park that Jen Baker from Pollinator Paradise has taken on to take care of. And during the pandemic, the city endorsed encampments at Woodlands Park, and the three gardens that we had built along the back of the fence during our makeover were just decimated with the traffic and everything. So we went in after 2 years of neglect, and the work was like beyond what we could manage as volunteers. But when we reached out to all levels of the city at different departments, there wasn't any staff because student numbers were down and there was no budget for the maintenance. So we did get a group that came in from Toronto and did the park for us, did the gardens. So the Birch Avenue green space, which I will admit is my backyard, prior to our adoption in 2015, it was a neglected area that received minimal city care. To mitigate negative activity that we were seeing, we adopted the park and we set about building gardens, having benches, garbage cans installed. And over the years, we have created gardens, added a memorial bench and a garden, and a free little library. There are 5 pollinator gardens that boast over 3,000 spring bulbs and hundreds of plants and native trees. We had an official gateway installed after 10 years, and we are now known as the Birch Avenue Park. It's become a welcoming space for children and families and serves as the first image of Hamilton as people enter the city by way of Birch Avenue. We get little vandalism, encampments are not allowed under Hydro One regulations, and we get amazing support from the Adopt a Park team. In good conscience, it's hard for me to let the space fall into disrepair after the work, time, commitment, and money that has gone into it. As our leadership ages, specifically me, and volunteer numbers continue to be low, we cannot keep up with the maintenance required. And last year we resorted to paid help. The cost for that in 2022 was $2,000. There's no water on the site, and efforts to get assistance have been unsuccessful at all levels. We have had that service provided by the same company that the city uses since 2019. We received 1 grant from the Ward 2 office that covered 2019. And we had paid over $1,700 above that out of pocket since then. The current cost to water is $180 per week. And over 20 weeks, that cost will be $3,600. That's $5,600 that I've been paying out of my own pocket and to maintain this space, which in my mind is absolutely gorgeous. So all of our environmental groups ask us to create gardens, increase our green space, plant pollinators. But when we do, there's no budget. And Public Works has a substantial budget for new infrastructure, and we'd like to see a budget put in place for maintenance of community gardens that are held within public space, not just by our group, but by other groups across the city. And that's basically my ask today, is help us take care of the gardens that make the city look good.
Thank you for your delegation. If I could if there's no other speakers, pass the chair on to Councillor Pauls, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda, and also for your years of resourcefulness at a necessity in terms of maintaining so many of the green spaces in Ward 3, which remain to be in a deficit as it relates to other parts of the community and green spaces. So through you, Vice Chair, could you outline how you, the Gala planning team and adoptees have raised funds to maintain the spaces that you're bringing to our attention as a committee?
We haven't, through the chair, we haven't really raised funds so much as received a lot of in-kind donations from various plant groups, from different organizations, and basically everything's been done that way with a few extras. We did receive a Clean and Green grant last year, which allowed us to purchase 500 new bulbs. And prior to the Hamilton Community Foundation withdrawing their funding, we had received a $500 grant at one point to purchase bulbs and plant them all throughout the neighborhood, but some in that space.
Thank you, Brenda. Go ahead.
Thank you. So some of that in-kind donation is also in the form of labor in terms of volunteers coming out to tend to the gardens, help plant up the donated materials and plant species, as well as coordinating other volunteers to come, correct? Yeah, thank you. And then in terms of the support that you're looking for from committee today moving forward, is it specific to the one site, or are you talking about this writ large in terms of the lack of support for Adopt-A-Park programs?
No, the Adopt-A-Park program is an amazing program, and it's very well run by the steward of that department. My ideal goal would be to have a garden club like the Crown Point Club does, but that hasn't happened in our neighborhood. Like I said, last year, I had the extra cash and the work needed to be done, so I paid. And then this year, I'm specifically looking at the green space and asking Public Works to consider budget for maintenance of the other gardens. And I know that other garden groups are also suffering from the lack of volunteers and the lack of help, just from conversations that I've had.
Councillor?
Thank you, through you. So you were asked today, just to clarify, Brenda, because you said two things, Birch Avenue specific, and then you also mentioned and maintenance for other parks.
Yes.
Could you just clarify and break it down one more time for committee?
Well, for example, the Pipeline Trail, which Crown Point operates, I've had conversations, and it's a lot of work for the volunteers that they have to carry it out. And they have a garden club of a good, solid membership. But I have had conversations with Bev Wager, and she's expressed that to me. And just basically, if a volunteer group or whatever goes to, I guess, the extent of wanting to improve their park, their neighborhood, then we're just asking that if something comes up, we need to hire somebody to bring in a load of soil or to spread the soil. Then we have a budget for that. And it doesn't have to be an excessive amount, because it basically, other than the cost of the watering over the last few years, I haven't really spent a lot of money on the parks. But like I said, when you have paid staff that are expecting a salary and you have to provide the means to keep those gardens viable and beautiful, then it does become a money issue. So I think it might involve that steward of that park saying, I've got 2 gardens here, we're good, we don't need any help, or I foresee wanting to add more flowers, and if we had $500 or $1,000, the grants just aren't there that allow for that small amounts to be coming out.
Thank you. And through you, Vice Chair, the no water on site specific to Birch Avenue, remember walking down that path with you, with the Gala folks, but specifically with you, through the Ward 3 office last term, and we ran into a challenge in providing water services on hydro property. We tried to look at a couple of solutions. One was pulling the water line from the municipal service. The other was looking at the adjacent business owner, potentially being able to tap their water, trying to find a bunch of different creative means and solutions to a municipal now designated park. So if I could, through you, Vice Chair, just a couple, at this point, the question isn't for the delegate, the question is to the staff to be able to provide an outline of why that water service couldn't be maintained. And are there scenarios where the city is providing water service to maintain green spaces that are municipally recognized?
So you want to ask a question to staff?
If I could, through you.
Yes, you can. Who would like to answer that?
Hi, through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. So the park and the Adopted Park program is run through my shop. I'm going to defer this question to Kara Bunn, who's the manager of Parks and Cemeteries, who I hope has a little bit of background on the specifics around the water line at Birch Avenue. Thank you.
Hi there, through the chair, Kara Bunn, Manager of Parks and Cemeteries. The challenge is that that land is still owned by Hydro, and so what I guess we'd have to look at alternative options like a water tank. If a water tank was placed there, we'd still have to get permission from Hydro, but it could be filled with a water truck as need be. There would still be a cost to providing that water, however.
Thank you. And then if I could, through you, just in terms of the maintenance support request that's being itemized here by the delegation, if I could, through you to staff, do we provide any support to any other municipal green spaces like the ones that's referenced in terms of providing maintenance support?
Through the chair, yes, there is a level of support. It's not the level that is being asked for today. What's provided typically is startup help if there's sod removal that's needed. Staff also will provide the community clean trailer that is fully stocked with supplies. We also supply wood chips to sites when that's needed. However, we don't have staffing available to garden.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions to staff. And at the before I take the chair back, I am concerned and, previously have been allocating Ward 3 discretionary funds to be able to support the efforts, not specifically to Birch Avenue, but in general in terms of resident-led initiatives that speak to resiliency, but also enhance public space. So I'll continue that effort through those discretionary funds, but at a future date, need to look at this maintenance support beyond startup phases as being outlined by the delegate today. Thank you.
I'll give you the chair, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions if I may.
Well, there you go. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda, for delegating. I'm just wondering, for these green spaces and public space, of the committee that you have you ever thought of sponsorship for those spaces?
We don't have any regular sponsorship or anything built up. Like I said, it's been mainly in-kind support. If we're doing a garden project, we'll contact Pollinator Paradise or Butterfly Way, and they will contribute to us. But we don't have like a corporate sponsor. I did approach Kiwanis, who is also very good at supporting Gala. They're actually our fiscal sponsor, and they were willing to contribute, but they need another funder to match their contribution.
Thank you for that. I know through our mediums we do have sponsors and all that, and I'm wondering if you can maybe look at that option maybe.
I would love to, Councillor Pauls, if I could.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. That exhausts the speakers list. So back to you, Brenda, for your second delegation.
Okay. I don't usually talk this much, do I? So today I want to bring your attention to a specific situation regarding waste management.
Brenda, sorry to interrupt you. Could you just pull the microphone closer to your mouth so that you're heard audibly on the live feed? Thank you.
Okay. So today I want to speak about waste management for a specific situation. Again, it's a group that I founded in 2012 called Beautiful Alleys. And since then, we have done 2 regular cleanups, spring and fall, each year, with the exception of 2020. We didn't do spring. We have over 500 members that follow us, and support residents to be involved with regular cleanups. And we work very closely with the Team Up to Cleanup team for the basic supplies of garbage bags and gloves. Waste management is a vital part of our work, and I've had numerous conversations with everyone from top management to the staff on the truck. And because our cleanups are on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., staff cannot work past noon without incurring overtime or violating their collective agreement, which means that there's often garbage left over that doesn't get picked up until the following day or the next week. The piled up garbage attracts more illegal dumping. It gets vandalized, and on top of that, if we do use waste management, they want a GPS code for each location. During each cleanup, we do upwards of 100 locations so we'd probably be looking at least 50 GPS codes that we'd have to provide. Our best option that we came up with is to rent disposal bins, and we locate those throughout the city at sort of central spaces, and then our volunteers will use trailers, use their vehicles, and they'll bring the garbage that they collect to the bin. It sits there over the weekend, and the bin company picks it up. And the cost for each of those bins is $250. So I've been told that the monetary value of volunteer hours is $20 per hour. In the spring of 2022, we had 400 volunteers registered, and they worked for 5 hours. That equates to $40,000. Then we rented trailers and trucks for volunteers to pick up the garbage because the city wasn't scheduled to pick it up until Sunday. And we knew that if we didn't pick it up, it would be torn apart. And that basically did happen, and our volunteers had to go back out and rebag some of it the following day. And most of what they rebagged was taken to the disposal bins that CN rents for our track cleanups. The ideal budget, if we figured it out for Beautiful Alleys, to include the extra supplies that aren't provided by Keep Hamilton Clean and Green, volunteer appreciation in the form of a luncheon and perhaps a small token gift is over $6,000 annually for the 2 cleanups. And to cut costs, we often can't do a lot of that. You know, I get a fantastic deal on pizza, and you know, so again, we're relying on our businesses and our supports in the community to help us out where we can. The cost for the bins that to rent for all the areas across the city is $2,700. And the city has no budget for that. And I have had conversations with the manager of Keep Hamilton Clean and Green, and there's no budget for the bins. We can't access their grant program to pay for the bins. And we just feel that the work we do is benefiting the city. And like I always said, I never thought I'd still be picking up garbage 10 years later, but it seems that it's not going to go away anytime soon. And, you know, it gets, I've never come before council or committee and said, we need help. But I know I've harassed a lot of people asking for help, but I've never asked outright, and that's what I'm doing now. We'd like Waste Management, Public Works to consider that in their budget going forward. and we're asking the city to support and value the work of our volunteers. I'm going to stop.
Okay,
Thank you. Just turning the chair over to Councillor
Yes,
Pauls.
thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. And on this one specifically, all the work on beautiful alleyways over the last decade, but also, I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to support the efforts for a number of years now in terms of contributions from the Ward 3 discretionary pots, the Ward 3 bell tower funds, as well as supporting the volunteer call out to help get those, how many did you say? 400 volunteers? Yeah. So can you explain to committee perhaps, I'm pretty sure everybody who's been around the table or who've been personally part of the efforts over the years know about it, but what's different about Beautiful Alleys' approach to cleanup compared to the ones that many other councillors may see in their neighborhoods?
So we were one of the, I think, first groups that sort of formed. What we do is we do it more as a community engagement effort. Bring your neighbors, meet your neighbors, and we encourage our volunteers to maintain those spaces on a regular basis. And to do that, Keep Hamilton Clean and Green has been gracious enough to allow me to keep a supply of bags on hand. I think that it's an ongoing problem, and people are encouraged when they see that they don't need to clean their alley on cleanup day because they've kept it clean all year. And so then they're able to move ahead, and they're able to envision, what can we use the alley for? Is it a cycling path? Do my kids want to ride their bikes there? So it's basically about envisioning what the space could be used for other than a cut through between streets or something. So I think that, as I said, like most of the work we do is involved around engaging the community. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Councillor Wilson's assistant, who says, we're encouraging people, Councillor Maureen Wilson, we need to encourage people to take stewardship of their spaces. And that's what we try to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further
Councillor?
questions.
That's it?
Yep. Okay. Councillor Crutch.
Hi, Brendan. Thanks very much for your delegation. As you know, I personally been involved in situations where there's not that synchronicity between at the pickup specifically in terms of like time of day, when the pickups happen, where the locations are, and there ends up being this sort of like wonderful impact of having the cleanups happen, but then orange and clear garbage bags kind of like everywhere downtown, being like, uh-oh. So is that like primarily what your concern is here in terms of the first part of what you're asking for, is to make sure there's better coordination? Just making sure I understand, because like I have a detailed understanding, but I want to make sure that like it's really clear what the ask is.
Through the chair, not specifically coordination. The best compliment I ever received was that somebody said, wow, this is so organized, you know. And I understand, you know, overtime and collective agreements and all of that stuff. So I understand it. And what we're trying to do is find a way to work around those so that we can continue the work. And you're right, like there's nothing more satisfying than seeing bags of orange bags piled up on every street corner kind of thing, you know. So it's, I don't believe that any kind of coordination would solve the problem of having city staff pick up the garbage, because it would involve collective agreements over time, that type of thing.
Councillor?
Okay, I think I understand your point. I'm just looking for more clarity on the commitment of resources piece, like how would that work? I guess I just missed it, and I apologize. So maybe just for me, exactly how you imagine the commitment of resources working.
Okay. I'm sorry, did I miss the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me put that in the phrase, turn over question. Brenda, how exactly would you imagine the commitment of resources working? Maybe I'm just missing it. The commitment of resources to ensuring that things get picked up at these cleanups. How exactly?
I honestly don't understand your question, Cameron Croach, Councillor Croach.
Okay, maybe it's just me. I'm going to leave it for now. I can always find you later.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Crutch. Councillor Beatty.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I'm kind of, I think I want to build off of maybe where Councillor Crutch was going, Brenda. And first, I have to correct you that the value of volunteer labor is far higher than you quoted. I would dare say invaluable, and thank you for the work that you're doing. My ears kind of perked up during this presentation that you're making because we're planning a rather large-scale community cleanup in the Stony Creek, Winona area, geared around Earth Day. And from what I understand, and maybe you can just help me clarify, that the city program allows for pickup to take place on Saturday up until 12 o'clock. Is that correct? I just kind of want to throw that out there.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we've offered to help, but realistically speaking, it's not all that helpful because a number of these programs, a number of these volunteer community cleanup days take place generally, and mine's the same, what we're doing in our community, between 9 and 11 or 12, which doesn't leave a whole lot of time for the collection stage. And I understand that maybe I'm just kind of getting you to clarify that that is an issue.
Yeah. Through the chair, I just, what we found is that city staff, when they were helping us, would come out at 9 o'clock and then they would just drive around looking for places. And they'd drive past one place and there'd be maybe 2 bags. And then they wouldn't go back to that place because they've already visited that location. And we would provide them prior to with a spreadsheet showing, you know, where garbage was going to be left. So again, yes, then there's a lot left over at the end of it.
So we have a program where we have 400, 500 well-meaning volunteers, and I hope to replicate those numbers, but don't hold me to it, in Ward 10, going out, making a massive impact in the community and cleaning up the community, but then the bags stay there for a period of time, which has spin-off or ancillary problems that are created as a result of the collection issue not being addressed. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay, so then through the chair, I'm wondering if there's an appropriate ask of staff that this could be examined, looked at, addressed in some way. Maybe through you, I could ask, I don't know who's on the bench that would be able to respond, that would have carriage of this, but knowing the impact that it's currently having and is likely to have in future, and trying to make this program as successful as possible, create a certain amount of ease of use for others in other parts of the city to encourage others to get involved and undertake similar programs. I'm wondering who I may direct a question to see if this could be looked at, find a workaround, find a different way to deliver this so as to make it more functional.
You got it, Director Story.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Angela Story, the Director of Waste Management. To Councillor Beatty, through the chair. We have a number of options available. So what our delegate is speaking about today is when downtown cleanliness from the Waste Management Division. It's on an asset that they maintain. We have crews that go around on Saturdays and Sundays to empty litter cans. So that's their job on the weekends. And so while they're doing that, if a pre-established cleanup occurs, we're on the job from 5 until 1. So that's where that noon deadline comes in for that group. When you register for cleanups, though, in your situation coming up, there's a number of ways that you can have your waste collected. If your cleanup is in a park, then parks would be coordinated through the Clean and Green coordinator to collect that waste, and they would be on till closer to 3 o'clock. So depending on what their job is on that day when you need those collections. Not to speak for Director Field or for Manager Pete Sniolis back here, but Roads also runs, pickup trucks on the weekend doing their tasks. And if something was on an asset that they own, then they would be coordinated to collect that waste. So when you register for a cleanup, as our delegate knows, the smaller cleanups are a little bit easier to handle because it might be a brownie group or a school group, something like that, that's going out, and they might take their orange bags home and put it out on the curb on their next collection day because that's easy for them to do. Somebody else might take those orange bags, put it in the back of their car or the back of their pickup truck and take it to a community recycling center and dump it there for free. Large events is where we have just the staffing concerns, where we do have groups in working, and they also want to, with the coordination of the Clean and Green group, come out and collect the waste that's been collected by the volunteers. So our delegate today, they've gone that extra mile with their hundreds of volunteers to rent bins to be able to not have the waste sit there for the whole weekend. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, thank you for the answer, Angela, really appreciate it. So I think what I heard perhaps was that there's other city departments, divisions that have companion programs to what's taking place based on where those orange bags are ending up. So if there's a certain amount of coordination where the community cleanup, for example, may begin and end at a city park, then there's a coordination level with parks that would allow for those bags to be picked up during a different time frame. If there's a beginning and end on a city road allowance, perhaps there's another coordination piece. And I see Director Field's head nodding, thank you, sir, that the roads department may be involved with. All these different levels of coordination, though, however, I just want to understand, is that done through the Clean and Green initiative where they, the coordinators, will do that on your behalf if you're the organizer and say, if you're starting and beginning at and ending at a city park, this level of service may be available to you. If you're starting on a road allowance, this level of service may be allowed to you. I'm just wondering, from the city's end, the coordination piece, what takes place to ensure that all of those multiple different options are brought together for the benefit of the organizers.
Thank you. If I could quickly, Director Story.
Through the chair to Councillor Beattie, that's absolutely correct. So that's why we have one Clean and Green coordinator in the Environmental Services Division. So the online application is there. People fill it out. They actually select their method of waste removal, or I'll bring it home at the end of it, so that when they go to pick up their supplies pre-collect or pre-event, they already know what they're going to do with their waste. And then typically the Thursday before the weekend, because usually events happen on the weekend, the Thursday before, the Clean and Green coordinator will coordinate all of the events scheduled for the weekend, send it out to Parks, Roads, or Waste to let them know what the expectation is during the weekend.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'm just going to clarify before we go to second-time speakers. Our delegate is still standing, and we're moving towards questions around staff, around Clean and Green. So if I could just clarify, any further questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you, Brenda, for being here. Councillor Crutch, second-time speaker, question to staff.
Thanks, and thanks to Councillor Beattie for tearing the words from my brain. I appreciate it. It's very helpful. Apparently I wasn't getting them out there. Yeah, I think that, this question's for staff. There's a gap. Like, I've been there, present for the gap, like in the moment, right? And I know Brenda has, and many volunteers have been there in that gap where it doesn't happen. Like, what's missing? Like, there is something missing. I'm telling you, I've stood there and it's not happening. The bags haven't gotten picked up, and there's been a calamity about the situation. So, like, how do we address that issue?
So through the chair to Councillor Crutch, I think what's missing in the program for Team Up to Cleanup is when they're really big. So when the cleanups are really large, it's overwhelming for the coordinator of the event. It's overwhelming for people at the end of the event who want to celebrate their success but have all of this stuff hanging around. And it's overwhelming a little bit for staff because they're expecting to go and pick up a few bags to be able to take to the transfer station. And, you know, the delegate, like the delegate said, there could be 15 locations. So it really is about the preparation and the organization of the cleanup in advance.
Thank you. Councillor, any further questions? And I do want to move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
And through the chair. So I say this, I'm asking these questions because you're saying that one of the gaps is that there's a large event. Yeah, and so these community volunteers are doing a huge service for the city in terms of cleaning up this garbage, right? So how do we find a way to match that? Like some events that have been going on, and specifically I'll give a shout out to the event that happens in the spring, and there's one that happens in the fall, across wards 1, 2, and 3, I think it is, sometimes into ward 4. It's massive, and we know it's happening year upon year upon year. I've been involved every year. So we know at this point that we can anticipate there's going to be multiple locations. We anticipate there's going to be a ton of garbage, right, at the end of these things. How can we ensure that we're closing that gap? Do we need to have a motion here to do something? Is like what do we have to do to make that happen? Because there's a gap, and it's historical at this point because we know it's happening year over year over year.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Councillor, and I was going to suggest that we do, in respect of the agenda and the fact that we don't have the Clean and Green and Team Up to Clean Up report here on the agenda, that perhaps this would be appropriate for a motion coming up, except there is General Manager Khan who wanted to respond to your specific question.
Good afternoon, through the chair, General Manager Carlisle Can. Responding to your question, Councillor. As we move forward, we have, like you say, a repository, a list of all these events that are happening. We're going to start looking and documenting the resources required to meet the level of services that is required. We will come back to this committee and through the budget process to look at what that resourcing will look like. We hope to take a holistic approach to it and start to document that a little bit better. We will draw upon our community partners and the public in helping us understand what the needs are. And I will continue to work with the different divisions to make sure that the options that are available to them are well communicated. And as they plan the event and they think of the final stages and how do you wrap up the event, that all options are available and can be available to them for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks. That gives me a bit of language to draft a notice of motion, which I'll do now, and I'll send to you and Director Story, and then maybe we can get that for later on the agenda. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving on to 7.4, Maimoon Bouillon. Got it. McMaster EcoCar representing EV in Hamilton, respecting EVs in Hamilton. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
So hi, my name is Maimoon Bouillon. I go by Moon. I'm representing one of the largest student organizations in Canada. We are a team that competes in the Electric Vehicle Challenge, EcoCar EV Challenge. We are the competition's sponsored by U.S. Department of Energy, MathWorks, General Motors, and this year we introduced something called the equity stream, so diversity, equity, and inclusion stream, into the competition. And what you might think that looks like is like, oh, DEI, EDI, that sounds like a lot of HR work, but in reality, our work involves a ton of public consultation, ton of working with different resource groups and different community organizations here within Hamilton. And I wanted to come here today to just talk a little bit about it. So luckily for you guys, I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for policy change. I'm mainly here to talk about the project and see what questions you might ask me to start this sort of next 4 years of long process consultations with the City of Hamilton, the same way we've done with the provincial government and the federal government. So some of the projects that we've already started for political change is that we hosted Prime Minister Trudeau at the EcoCar base station. We hosted the Honourable Minister of Transportation. We started the consultation process with the university on Indigenous issues. So this is something I'm very proud of, is working to go into Six Nations and working with their community leaders to see what projects we could work with them on, with their leadership, to improve electric vehicle representation within Indigenous communities. We also are very keen on education, like of course we're an education group in the end, and we realize that the only way we ensure a sustainable future is if we get in young and we get with high school students and middle school students to really promote electric vehicle technologies and the career paths that come from that, whether that's trades programs, whether that's manufacturing programs, whether that means they pursue a degree in engineering like I did. And through that, we've done things like Saturday, we hosted a high school infrastructure challenge where about 35 students from local high schools, such as Westdale Secondary, came down and competed and built innovative solutions to electric vehicle challenges, such as parking garages. How do you make parking garages interesting to high school students? Well, you explain to them that a parking garage is a really complicated civil engineering challenge. Electric vehicle battery technology, how do you make that interesting to students? Well, you tell them, like, you know, we have to source the materials from somewhere. How do we do that sustainably? And then, of course, a project on materials. I'm a materials engineer I'm a student studying materials engineering, and the questions on, like, the chassis of the car, how do you make that sustainable? Hamilton is, again, one of the, like all of you know, is a steel producing city. We have a lot of steel industries. And then going from there, we also really want to work with the city going forward. And though I'm not really asking for anything specific, I wanted to bring to your attention the projects that we have for the year 2, year 3, and year 4 going forward, and seeing where councillors might ask me questions, because that really builds how I come back with a proposal to you guys in year 2. So first of all, we want to build more formal partnerships with the city, talking about education, talking about outreach, jobs training programs. In the end, we're here to empower people, really give them the education and training they need. And we can do that because we have connections with people like General Motors that can hire people. We want to also talk about building relationships with the school boards. The high school infrastructure challenge I built, it was really just me emailing people. I got into contact with the trustees and said, hey, can you help me out? But that doesn't seem like a sustainable model going forward. Building proper communications line between us and the school boards would help us with our education projects. And then, of course, we know that Hamilton is really keen on electrifying their fleet. And this is an amazing learning opportunity for the EcoCar EV team to see where people in municipal governments make decisions on electric vehicles, on hybrid technologies. And so the question there is, like, how can we get involved with that project, and how to see what decisions are made. And just as a final note, it's really interesting for us building this new portfolio going forward. Why we do this and what comes out of it. Is it just for competition? That wouldn't make this work worthwhile. We really are here to give back to our communities because, you know, in the end, we're privileged to be able to work on the electric vehicle challenge. We're able to get the Cadillac Lyriq to work on. So really building out and trying to engage our stakeholders and our community is important to us. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information and for your delegation. There's no speakers indicated. Oh, okay. So just going to encourage you all to hit the microphone. If the microphone's not working, I'm going to flag that to clerks. So first up, we have Councillor Crutch, followed by Councillor Pauls. I'm just going by the list.
It's a quick question. First of all, thank you. And so Maimoon is your name. That's wonderful. I'm just wondering, it's great to have all these electric cars and know more about it. We're talking about congestion. We're talking about traffic. We're talking, so let's say we replace every single car that we have now into electric. Do you engage people in transit, using transit as well? Or is it just let's build more cars and let's move on?
Of course. Public transit, in the end, is the most important solution to the congestion problem, the sustainability problem. We are working, well, we're trying to set up a meeting with Metrolinx to bring out how do we integrate electric vehicles and reduction of car use in a sustainable model with public transit. We are a big fan of the LRT project, and to us, it's both ways. We need both electric vehicles to replace gas-guzzling cars, but we also need public transit to take off the impetus to use a car for every single transportation mode when not necessary.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad you're engaging people about transit, because that's what we've been talking about. But I don't know if you're aware, Tesla is opening a hub at Lime Ridge Mall next year. So it'll be very interesting. It's a hub where everybody comes and looks at cars, and they also fix cars there. Obviously, it's batteries and, tires and all of that kind of adjustment to the cars. So I don't know if you were aware of that. So
I was not aware of that. That's a really interesting project.
Yes.
A lot of our students do end up working at Tesla. So I think this year, at least 3 students are currently going from the EcoCar Challenge to California to work at Tesla as interns.
Thank you very much. Good work.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Beatty.
Thanks, Moon. Appreciate it very much. And I wanted to ask specifically if you could just talk a bit more about the competition aspect, because that does make this a little tricky for me to unpack and understand. And that seems to be the overarching focus here of how this 4-year project works. Is it's based on a competition aspect, and you're looking to place in the top 5. If you could just expand on that a bit more so we can understand that.
100%, and that's a really good question. So the competition enables us through project funding, and yes, in the end, we are competing against schools like Georgia Tech, University of Alabama, University of Texas, pretty prestigious schools down in the States. Personally, I make the distinction between competition and work that we just do. For example, the work for competition is almost over for me, but I'm still working with organizations such as the Immigrant Working Center to build out, hey, let's do a workshop with new Ukrainian refugees on how to get jobs in the automotive sector. That's not really going to competition. I mean, I will mention it, but in the end, it is purely work that we're doing to engage with our stakeholders. But yes, so competition looks like this. I have to write deliverables. I write the deliverables answering their questions. What did you do? How did this engage your stakeholders? What data did you collect? What analysis of the data did you collect? So for example, with the high school event, I'm looking at things like, what's the gender breakdown of the participants? Are they have their parents gone to university? Because of course they have not gone to university yet. Things like that to see if we're actually having impacts in key stakeholder demographics, which is people who have not gone to university and people who have typically been excluded from university processes to go to university, just for that competition specifically. For the Immigrant Working Center, we'll be asking questions like, have these people already secured jobs in Canada? What is their education level back in Ukraine? Stuff like that. And then we would write about it and we would make conclusions as to the effectiveness of our policies. Because in the end, companies do have stakeholder relations, and we're emulating what a startup would do in that case.
Councillor?
Thanks. And this is part of a 4-year competition with other university against other university teams. And what's it like? I'm looking for you just to really be clear about what the outcome of the competition is and what you're gaining from competing. And if you win, what the result is. That's kind of what I meant. And I should have said that.
Oh, yeah, totally. So there is both the engineering side. So there is, and we get this thing called the Cadillac Lyric. It's a new electric vehicle. We have to do things like change its architecture and stuff like that. We're scored on the technical engineering part. For the diversity, equity, inclusion stream, we're scored on our stakeholder relationship. I think the winning is literally just a trophy, but there's not any sort of super grand prize or anything like that. And there is probably some award money, but nothing that I would see. Typically just goes back into the team for next competition cycle.
Thank you. And have you approached the folks at City Lab at all in doing this?
I am really excited. Yes. So that is one of the next consulting groups that I'm looking into working with, City Lab at McMaster. It is a project that I think that will start in the summer because they do excellent research with students in policy. I actually got accepted to the City Lab project, but I had to take a co-op somewhere else, unfortunately. So I did not get to have that wonderful experience.
Thanks. That was going to be my suggestion to you, is that seems like it may help you solve some of the longstanding governance issues you wanted to solve around connections with the school board, around perhaps projects that you could do with Public Works in terms of seeing what kinds of things we're doing here at the city. City Lab seems like exactly that tool, having some city champions to do that work with. So I'm glad you're going to be going there. Thanks very much for your presentation.
Of course. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Beatty, please.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, Moon, thank you so much for the great presentation. Really exciting. I have a daughter that's attending second-year mechanical engineering at Mac, and I know that she had expressed some interest in the project that you're talking about here today. I've been a big advocate of youth and STEM initiatives upstream in elementary schools, secondary schools, and so I love the alignment that you're talking about and trying to make those connections. Are you, I guess I have 2 questions. are you partnering at all with the FIRST robotics community? That's my first question.
Yes, so we have done a project with FIRST Robotics. It was their STEMLY Cup event. We went out there and we did consultations. When I say consultations, literally it was just me and a few other team members, talking to high school students, being like, hey, have you ever considered Mac for engineering? Have you ever considered Mac in general? What do you want to do with your future? I think the most important part of that work is just like, high school students, when I was in high school at least, when I looked at a university student, I was like mystified as to the difference in that person, like, oh, that must be in this like adult who knows everything, right? And now that I'm in university, I feel like when I look at you guys and your careers, I'm like, those are the adults who know everything. And I think it's just an unending cycle of that. But just to demystify it, talk to the high school students, really be there for them, be the good example that we always talk about. That's mainly the work we do there. I think that helping an FRC team would be cool. We would need to check with FRC itself whether or not that's allowed, because of course we're a big organization.
My follow-up question through you, Chair Nan. Are you aware that the provincial championships are here in Hamilton over the Easter weekend, and have you made any connections there to see if there may be some alignment? Because it's essentially, when I say provincial championships, it's essentially our national championships. Some of the smartest STEM and engineering students, potential engineering students for you, are going to be attending at First Ontario, and maybe a great platform for you to showcase what you're doing and make some great connections. I'm just wondering if you had any conversations about trying to get involved with that.
So no, that would be an amazing thing to go to. We could really present what we did with STEMLY Cup, which we brought the car out. So this is last year, sorry. This is the year before car, which was the, sorry, it's escaping me, but we brought a car out. We bring out all our promotional materials and, choose engineering and stuff like that. So that would be a great thing to get involved in.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Moon, if you would like a connection, please email me. Please get in touch. I'd be happy to help you with that.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, and that exhausts our speakers list. Thank you so much for your delegation this afternoon.
Thank you so much for listening.
Next up, we have Mandy Smith here to delegate about logistics for maintaining alleys in Barton, Cannon, Birch, and Sherman Grid.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to...
If you could just bring the microphone closer to your face. Bring the microphone closer to your face while you're speaking. There we go. The one that's red. There you go. You got it.
This one?
Yep. And you got it.
We'll try this again. Hi, my name is Mandy, and I live in Ward 3. And for the last 10 years, I've been actively involved with Beautiful Alleys. I'm not going to go over again what Brenda's already discussed, but what I can do is tell you something of what it's like to be involved from the practical end of things. I have a disability, and it comes and goes. So what I did was I cordoned off an area in Ward 3, which I call the grid, and it's about 3 kilometers of alley altogether. And basically, I manage it myself. I don't always know where I'm going to drop off bags and things, so I put them in my backyard. I don't fool around with little orange bags. I use contractor bags and bigger because they're more efficient. And what I do is pick up garbage. And some of those tools have actually been designed for me by my partner, and it works quite well. I guess where we started to run into a bit of a challenge was it was all good in the beginning. We actually swept that alley between Chestnut and Kenrade. Now things have changed, okay? And we are getting situations where we're encountering so-called garbage that's frankly not fit to be polite, to just be discussed amongst a polite company. I run into a lot of biohazard. I wear steel-toed boots. I have a great big garbage bin, which is mine, but I cart it around and put it in the back, and then I take it up to that dump over by La Coco's. What I take out is measured in tonnage. Okay, at any given point in time, over a course of a year, I take out in the area of around 500 kilograms. Of that, like I said, I pay for my own bag. I've obviously, paying for my car and things like that. The bottom line is that some of that stuff is pretty scary, okay? I just happened to pick one that was, a little bit dicey. But at the same time, curiously enough, we're also getting a lot of support from the community. By that, I mean people that are substance challenged. So when they see me and I'm coming through, what they do now is they take their needles and they put them underneath stuff, which means that little kids and pets and things like that are less subjected to them. On any given sweep, I probably bring in the area of 80 needles and components, okay, which I stash, and they've got to be packaged very carefully when I take them to the dump and things like that. The bottom line is that we need beautiful alleys, not just because it's beautiful, but also because it's an environmental concern. I think we're all familiar with that. It's also because it brings down the amount of nasties that are occurring out there. By that I mean infestations and so on and so forth. One thing I could also ask you for, though, on a personal level, is that we've been asked to provide the names and numbers of the backyards which are chronic offenders. And I've done that for years now. But people don't seem to be actioning it. And it would be helpful if we could provide an address and say, this is an issue. And to a point raised earlier, I believe, if this could happen 3 or 4 days or even a week in advance, that would help us a lot. Because in some cases, we're moving trees. We're moving furniture. Carts are actually obstructing the alleyways and things like that. And with that, I invite questions. Thank you.
Thank you. First up, we have Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, and thank you, Mandy, for all you do to help us. I'm just wondering, these alleys, do you start cleaning them in the winter? Are these unassumed alleys, or does the city take the snow out? When do you start cleaning?
There are 33 kilometers of alleys in the city of Hamilton, approximately. I didn't measure them personally, so I can't say for sure. But the bottom line is that we can't do it in the winter because of snowfall. Personally, I get out there as soon as I'm able to move that cart and as soon as I'm able to see the garbage. Okay. And then I go right through.
Because I know some alleys that are cleaned by the city and some aren't. So I'm just wondering, I don't know your area, Barton, Cannon, Birch, Sherman, all those alleys. They're not cleaned in the winter. So obviously you wait till the snow melts and you go out there and start cleaning. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. And I often act as an independent because I don't know when my disability is going to kick in, okay? Yeah. So what happens is I sort of run with it when I have the ability to. And like I said, it can vary every single time. The beauty is when people see us doing it, it's great. But these areas in Ward 3 are most definitely not assumed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenge. I can see it, especially, all winter. Maybe these are covered, all the, like you said, needles or whatever you find, are covered by the snow. When the snow melts, then you see all the garbage and you need to pick up. So thank you for your delegation.
Very much my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. While you have the microphone on.
Go ahead,
Thank
Councillor.
you. So through you, Vice Chair, thanks, Mandy, for coming in and for painting the picture for my colleagues around the degree and magnitude of cleanup that yourself and many others are engaged in Ward 3. What's clear to me is that you're providing a public service in an area that, because of maybe the unassumed nature of alleyways, goes unaddressed by the city. So first of all, thank you for your ongoing years of dedication and service that way. My question to you is about specifically the needles and other biohazards. In your delegation here today to committee, what is it that you're requesting or seeking support on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
No, that's the question for you.
That's the question to you.
I'm sorry?
The question for you is what support specifically are you looking for from committee in your delegation today?
I think that in some cases we're going to have upgraded equipment. You cannot go into this area with flip-flops. Okay, I learned that the hard way. I need nitrile gloves. I'm allergic to latex, but I also need something where if I do get hit with a needle, it's going to be on an angle or something like that. That's definitely part of the list. Personally, I prefer a larger garbage bag. Volume-wise, it actually takes more than even a double of the regular size. And it also fits in my car, which is great. It's nice to have a coordinated effort where other people are working in a team with you rather than doing it alone. I'll digress a moment to tell you something that happened last fall where we were going down the alley between, let's see. Anyway, it was around Gibson, and I was with two big framed fellows, and we were ready for anything. And somebody had come out and literally dumped a truckload down. And after an hour and a half of going through that, they just got fed up. They got exhausted. And I'm not sure that I blame them. So when you talk in terms of equipment, yes, there's the stuff that I purchased, and I bring it in anyway. But at the same time, you have to recognize that at one point, I saw little kids coming in, and I had to block them off. I said, sorry, Mom, but we can't allow you to go here because I haven't been through it yet.
Great, thank you. Through you, Chair. I've been down many of those alleyways with large bags and protective gear, but honestly, there's moments that are concerning, right? That can get scary when you're not a trained volunteer in knowing how to deal with needles. After years of experience, now I know how about to go about it. But in your delegation, you speak about equipment. Is there anything from your sense that would be helpful in terms of training of volunteers?
Well, first and foremost, I am a trained volunteer.
Yeah.
I'm St. John Ambulance, intermediate level C with AED and the whole 9 yards. I've been like that since 1977. I've had people literally die in my backyard. And thank God I wasn't around that day because I would have done the stupid and, that kind of thing. The point is that any time where you have more than, I think it's 13 people, you should have a first aid kit. You should have somebody around who's first aid trained. Okay, and there should be some of us who have the common sense to say, wait a second, there's needles here or something like a biohazard that we have to manage. I mean, it's time to take this seriously, folks.
Agreed.
Because anything can happen.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Mandy, and through you, Vice Chair, that's specifically what I was looking for, is that biohazard training, as well as the recommendations in terms of having folks with first aid training that are part of the coordination team of our large-scale community efforts for cleanups, given the reality of what we're facing and what we're cleaning up at the end of the day. And for volunteers who come into it, I think, rolling up their sleeves, wanting to do the good thing, but not necessarily knowing what they're about to encounter. So I appreciate that.
Personally, what I do is I go to Shoppers Drug Mart, and they often have naloxone kits available. I go into areas where I know there's a crack house, and I drop them off. Okay. I also have a mask and things like that at any given point in time. I have one right now. And the idea is to try to support them. I promise you, within 2 or 3 days, those kits disappear. People are getting it. Okay? I mean, it makes perfect sense. I don't know if we've saved any lives. Who's to know? But I'm glad I'm glad that we as beautiful alleys are on the side of the angels.
Thank you. I'll take back the chair. There's no further speakers. Thank you again, Mandy, for delegating today.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.6, there are 2 delegates, and this is in regards to the motion respecting the review of level of service for winter control and alignment with principles of Vision Zero. So first up, we have Asneev Mallet, and then followed by Tim Nolan. Are they in the audience? No, I don't see. Oh, she's virtual. Perfect. And then Tim, I see you. So we'll move to the virtual delegation first.
Okay. Can I begin?
We can't see you. Could you please turn on your, oh, you can't. My apologies. We can hear you loud and clear. Please proceed.
Okay, and my apologies. My computer does crazy things when I turn the video on. All right, so my name is Asneev Mallet, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. It is commendable that Council is looking at Vision Zero to guide its approach to road safety with a focus on children and seniors and snow removal. But please also remember there are adults with disabilities living independently who are seriously impacted by snow. All children, whether they have a disability or not, are generally under the guidance and protection of parents. while adults and seniors with disabilities living independently have to get groceries, pick up medications, work, go to school, see a doctor, go to a hospital for treatment and other commitments. And snow has made this very difficult. At the same time, Council has been looking to eliminate or at least greatly reduce paratransit in the lens to have everyone, including people with mobility, stop for a sec. My apologies. Anyways, you're looking at reducing or severely or eliminating paratransit, and everyone is to use conventional transit system, even if they have mobility devices. Anyone who is unsteady to navigate through the ice and snow is going to find this difficult to do. Those who must use canes or walkers are faced with not only their own unsteadiness, but now their cane or walker is useless because it cannot navigate mounds of snow or ice. Imagine having limited balance and trying to navigate through and over lumps of hard snow and potentially ending up off the sidewalk. Someone with visual impairment no longer has the urban braille to guide them, and no way of knowing where the sidewalk may be a hazard with ice or blocked with ice or snow. And there are horror stories about people endangering their lives and ending up on the street. Wheelchairs do not have snow tires. I know some people think we do, and they are very, very slippery in the snow. And again, we can't step over blocked curbs or sidewalks, and we can easily be stranded. Many people have to use the street, and I'm sure you've seen people in wheelchairs on the road, and that's because the curbs are usually blocked, the snow isn't cleared all the way, and at any minute a plow will come through and block it up again. In the suburbs of Hamilton, there are many streets without sidewalks, so the driveway becomes the only access, and these are constantly blocked with mounds of snow by the snow plows. The streets and roads become impenetrable. As chair of ICPD, Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities, I know that transportation and snow are huge issues and discussed regularly. And there is a universal recognition that we are very vulnerable to these conditions. So why am I here? I strongly urge staff to consult with ACPD and other stakeholders, including service providers of programs. And I'd like to take that a step further. I'd like to ask you to include a representative from our committee in your meetings when you discuss and plan the new initiative and when you amend the snow removal bylaw. Tim Nolan will be speaking next, and I totally agree with him. We need transparency of recorded consultations to be distributed. At times, staff will consult with us, but the report doesn't indicate what was said. And even further, I think you would do well to have a representative involved in the implementation and evaluation of the best practices you choose. One of the reasons why we should be involved is not everyone understands. People using wheelchairs use the second door, the back door of the bus, and those areas are not being plowed. Only the front access to the bus is. And people with disabilities have to get to grocery stores, pharmacies, hospitals, clinics. And I ask, how can council ensure these places clear their snow and keep it clear? And thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Esniv, right on time. Speakers list is open. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you again for being here this afternoon and for delegating. And
My
next
pleasure.
up we have Tim Nolan.
Right here on the pad. And
No, your microphone's on.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Nan. I'd just like to start off by saying I feel pretty humbled in the presence of some of the previous speakers, Brenda and Mandy, about the work that they do. It's tremendous. Their volunteerism and their organization and their support. The city really relies heavily on that kind of assistance from the community. So I appreciate your allowing me to come and speak to you about snow clearing. I probably don't need to tell you all of the issues. Asna spoke very clearly about some of the challenges that people with disabilities face year over year over year. I have communicated with each of you individually as councillors, respecting my ask for your consideration. But for the record, if it's acceptable, Chair Nan, can I ask the clerk to read out what it is I'm specifically asking for?
Okay, 1 second, Tim. Clerk McIntosh is just pulling it up. Just a moment. We'll pause your time. Thank you.
Okay, so the amendments suggested to Councillor Spatafora's motion that's later on in the meeting are as follows. Whereas the Supreme Court of Canada on October 21st, 2021 in Nelson City v. Marchi rendered an opinion obligating municipalities to be more responsive to snow clearing needs for its pedestrians. Whereas the city's current snow clearing bylaw makes no reference to ensuring accessibility for its citizens with disabilities or seniors. And whereas the city's current snow clearing bylaw does not adequately address snow at the sides of roads or edges of sidewalks after both have been cleared, which is most often the source of issues and barriers to accessibility for pedestrians. And he's suggesting, Mr. Nolan is suggesting that the following might be added as direction for staff. That staff update the city's snow clearing bylaw to ensure it meets the needs of persons with disabilities and seniors, and that changes are enforceable. And that staff consult persons with disabilities and seniors, including but not solely limited to the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities and the Seniors Advisory Committee when reviewing snow clearing needs of the community, and that staff report back in full the comments and opinions of the disability and seniors communities, including the Committee for Persons with Disabilities and the Seniors Advisory Committee.
Thank you for that. Mr. Nolan, please proceed with your delegation.
So thank you very much through you, Chair Nan, to Carrie, the clerk, for reading that out. With respect to the Supreme Court has very clearly ruled that municipalities are subject to liability for not clearing snow adequately. The Vision Zero is great, and I want to acknowledge and thank Councillor Spatafora for that motion. I think it's a great motion, but I think that motion can be strengthened through the suggestions that I'm making. Vision Zero doesn't really address all of the street corners and all of the sidewalks in the non-primary route areas like a Main Street or a King Street or the primary streets in the city, the bus routes, etc. And those become a great source of challenge for people with disabilities. not everybody lives along a bus route, and in the wintertime they can't get to the bus routes because of the snow that piles up in the barriers. So, property owners are doing great sometimes around sidewalks. They're clearing the sidewalk. The city will do great clearing the snow, but there's I don't know what the technical word for is it, the wind drift?
Windrow.
That never gets cleared. And so, that's nobody's property and nobody touches it. And that becomes a huge source of a problem. So as a person with sight loss, I rely upon three things for me to be mobile: my hearing, my cane, and my feet. And in the wintertime, when there's an inch of snow, all of a sudden one of those sources of information disappears because my feet can't tell me information other than the only thing underneath me is snow. So I don't know what's under the snow. I don't know if it's a driveway, a sidewalk, a road, grass. I don't know what it is because all I know is snow. So I'm asking you to strengthen Councillor Spatafora's motion by acknowledging the Supreme Court decision, consulting with the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities and seniors, among other people in the community, clearly reporting that when they report back, staff report back later in the summer. And I'm asking that the snow clearing bylaw be updated because it is so out of date. It was last updated in 2003. And there's been lots of change since 2003, and it really is time for that bylaw to be updated. So thank you, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Nolan. First up on the speakers list is Councillor McMeekin.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and I just want to take a moment to thank you, Mr. Nolan, for your advocacy. I've appreciated your reaching out from time to time with respect to some of the issues that concerns the community folk with disabilities. And I'd be pleased, Madam Chair, to assuming it's a friendly amendment, to move the amendments that Mr. Nolan has proposed at an appropriate time. Let me, by way of background, just add a bit of lament that needs to be articulated. Notwithstanding the heroic efforts of our snow removal people, they work hard. There are some substantive fundamental foundational problems with what we have. I met with a person, a business owner, just the other day. I went in to see him, and he said that there was someone cleaning the sidewalk. He wasn't used to that because he has staff people going out to clean the sidewalk, but in the process of doing that, they completely obliterated a holding wall, probably a good 15, I'm not an engineer, but probably a good $10,000 to $15,000 worth of damage. And when asked by someone who was handling the contract around cleaning the parking lot, the fellow running the plow said, hey, give me a break. I've been working 24 hours straight and I still got Carlisle to do, right? So that is kind of endemic of this sort of situation up in my ward. Others may have their own horror stories. But two specifically that I want to share. One has to do, Mr. Nolan, with Vinegar Hill. You know it well in Waterdown. I got a bunch of letters one day saying, hey, Councillor, wonderful. You've cleared that sidewalk. There are a bunch of several people in wheelchairs there. I can now go downtown. Next day I got letters from the same people saying, but the snowplow came along and put all the snow back on the sidewalk, right? The busiest pedestrian intersection in my ward is the corner of Hamilton Street and number 5 Highway. There's one garage operational. The other 3 corners are all virtually vacant with lots of space to place snow, probably snow that needs to be removed, but in the absence of removal, to push it back. the roads were cleared and there were 6 to 8 foot piles of snow on all 4 corners. That's the busiest pedestrian intersection in the ward. It got drawn to my attention when one of my disability friends was going up Hamilton Street, which is very dangerous, in her electric wheelchair. And what the heck are you doing? Well, what do I do? 6 feet at the sidewalk, I can't negotiate that. It is intolerable to the disability community to have to put up with that. And I think Mr. Nolan's motion is very appropriate. I could go on sharing. I won't. I do want to say, for the record, that I'm really pleased in my conversations with Mr. Fields and Mr. Moore and Peter that they've been more than willing to assist and to, in some cases, help. The 92-year-old man with an extreme heart condition who called me and said, I've got a 3-foot-high frozen, what do you call it, a windrow? Yeah. Well, that was handled. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's very good. So with that, I want to say again, thanks, Mr. Nolan, for this. And I'm entirely supportive, and I suspect most of my council colleagues around the table will be as well.
Thank you, Councillor. So just a reminder, we are at questions of delegation, though I appreciate the statements of support as well. Councillor Pauls, followed by Councillor Jackson, please.
Councillor, I love your stories. Anyways, first of all, thank you through the chair. Thank you, Tim. I had a long conversation with you as well. But I'm just, my question is, did you find this year more challenging than any other year? And if you did, what was it? What were the reasons?
I'm not sure I found this year more challenging than in previous years. I mean, the snowfalls tend to be different from winter to winter. So, I can tell you in a winter past, I was out walking my dog shortly after a snowfall a couple of years back, and I was literally across the street from my home. I live in a condominium down on Caroline Street North at almost at York Boulevard. I was about a block away from my home, still on the same street, and I was lost. I couldn't find my way because I had got turned around because of the snow, and as a result of that, it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to try to figure out where I was, and the only means I had to figure it out was I had to listen for the traffic of the one-way roads. And when I could listen for the traffic on the one-way roads, I could figure out where I was, and then I could figure out how I had to get back home. That's the problem that you have with snow. With regard to this, to the bylaw, if I can say this, the bylaw currently requires people to clear their snow within 24 hours of the cessation of a snowfall, but there's never any good analysis of when snow stops falling. The bylaw should really be talking about 24 hours from the start of the snowfall, because the start of a snowfall is never ambiguous. You always know when the snowfall starts, but you don't always know when the snowfall ends. And so for bylaw to enforce that, and I'm not a bylaw enforcement officer, but for bylaw to enforce that, I would think would be extremely difficult. But it's not if it's from the commencement of the snowfall, not the end. So this year was a bit challenging because it happened later in the year, and so what we had is snowfall, and the snowfall was very heavy, and it was difficult to move. And so, I'm not sure this year was any worse than any other year, but I can say snowfall generally is a challenge, and we just need to be more thoughtful as a city about the needs of all of our citizens, those who are not able to look after snow on their own accord.
Thank you,
Thank you, and that's why your amendment is so important to make sure we have you in the conversation, because I found this year, even the year before wasn't as bad. This year, I've had able people call me and say they couldn't get through, they couldn't walk. So I feel for you, but I definitely will support the amendment when it comes. And I want to say thank you again for calling me and explaining all the things that you go through, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair Nan, and Tim, always good seeing you, and thanks for all your past and current leadership for ACPD, and I want to acknowledge the fact you're joined today by your lovely wife, Kim, as well, so thank you for what you both do. So, Tim, I just want to focus in, because Acting Director Mike Field, I'm sure, is going to possibly respond later on, especially when Councillor Spadafora puts his motion forward and if your amendments are agreeable and acceptable. Through you, Chair Nan. Tim, I just want to get targeted and focused. Are you mainly talking about ramped corners that during and after the snowfall are not cleared fast enough? Are you also talking about when the plows come back a second, third, fourth time and tend to recover, replug the city sidewalks, which make them unpassable? Can you just further explain and clarify for me? Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Yeah, thank you. I think all of the above, like really. You know, I think property owners, as I said earlier, I think property owners do try to do well by clearing snow. Not all, but I think people generally try to do right by clearing snow. And they've cleared the sidewalk. And the snow plows do a great job. They clear the roads. But it's that pile, and depending upon how much snowfall there is, that pile could be 6 inches high or 6 feet high. And that will vary from year to year and snowfall to snowfall. So, you know, if the corners are intended to be curb cuts for people who use mobility devices, and the plows that plow the snow from the road block those curb cuts, what's the point of the curb cut? Yep. So, you know, I don't think the curb cuts were designed to be constructed so that they're available to people only during the summer. I think they were intended to be available all year long. So I think we really need to think hard about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and making sure that people are not impeded by the temporary barrier called snow.
Thank you, Tim, and I appreciate the fact it's an intriguing suggestion on your part for Acting Director Field and staff to begin a conversation or an exploration, Chair Nan, looking at the feasibility of, as you suggested, when the snow begins to fall, should that trigger request for service by winter operations? I suspect we may hear, Chair Nan, there may be logistical issues, why that's not compatible, but at least you're offering up a new idea and a possible alteration to our bylaw. Thanks again, Tim. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor, and there's no further speakers at this time, so thank you again, Mr. Nolan, for your delegation.
Thank you very much. And if I may just acknowledge Mike Fields, he did communicate with me and he gave me a little bit of insight into the Vision Zero. That was very helpful, and I appreciate that, and the work that the city is doing, and Councillor Spadafora for the motion. I think it's a great first effort, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So while clerk is escorting, we'll just pause for a moment, but can I indicate who the mover and seconder will be for receiving all of the delegations? Thank you. Councillor A. Wilson, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. And in the background, if we could get the electronic vote up to receive all of the delegations that we've heard this afternoon. And that carries. Thank you all. Moving on to consent items. 9.1 is 9.1, various advisory committee minutes. A is the Hamilton Cycling Committee, and there are minutes there for December 7th, no quorum report for January 4th, and minutes from February 1st, and Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee minutes from January 17th. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive these reports? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you. And then a vote, please, to receive. That carries, thank you. Moving on to 9.2, 2022 Annual Drinking Water Report, PW Report 23014. Could I please get a mover and seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Jackson, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Pauls, thank you. Any discussion? Yes, we do. Councillor Jackson.
Chair Nan, thank you. I just think with this roughly 100-page document, and we're always conscientious as leaders of this community of our clean drinking water. Many of us brag about drinking from our taps through you. Maybe just a quick high level from Senior Director Winters, please.
Thank you. And recognizing we had a very thorough orientation, was it right before spring break? Please go ahead, Director.
Through you, Chair Nan, to Councillor Jackson, thank you very much. The report that's before you does provide, as required by Section 11 of the Ontario Drinking Water Regulation, a copy of the City of Hamilton's annual drinking water report. That was posted on the city's website for public access on February 28th of this year, and that was the same day, Chair Nan, you mentioned we went through the standard of care training with this new council for the drinking water quality management standard. This report also includes a summary report of our drinking water quality management system from 2022. Certainly be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Councillor?
Just a last follow-up. Can you explain to the public, Senior Director, the accreditation that occurs and who actually does the accreditation to approve our drinking water is still top-notch? That's my last question, Chair Nan. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Certainly. Through you, Chair Nan. So our drinking water system is permitted and licensed by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Those licenses are renewed every 5 years. And on a 3-year cycle, our drinking water quality management systems, or drinking water quality management system is reaccredited by SAI Global. They just changed their name, but I forget their updated name. I apologize. They audit us every single year. 2 out of 3 years, there's an off-site document audit, and the 3rd year they come on site and do a full audit of our processes and facilities. We've been fully accredited since 2012 and continue to meet and exceed all of our obligations under the Drinking Quality Management Standard.
Wonderful, reassuring news. Thanks, Chair Nan. I continue to move receipt of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. No further questions, so at this point it's a vote in favor to receive or opposed. That carries, thank you. Now on to 9.3, our annual water main break report 2022, PW report 23015. May I please have a mover and second to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any discussion on the item? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please. The long list of Ward 1 breaks.
Now. Thank you very much. My favorite topic. If I could, through to the chair, just so I understand this report, thank you to staff for its preparation. There's a few terms here I just want to make sure I clearly comprehend. Ground movement is a cause of a break, along with displaced pipe joints, along with corrosion. I think I understand corrosion, but if I could understand a little bit better what causes the ground movement and what would precipitate a displaced pipe joint. Thank you, through you.
Thank you. Over to you, Director.
So through you, Chair Nan, I've got Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations here. He'd be happy to answer any questions on this report. Shane?
Good afternoon. Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. Through you, Chair. When we talk about ground movement, that's often to do with the thaw and frost, the heaving of the soils as moisture penetrates, it freezes, which displaces the soil, which can also affect our pipes and put extra pressure on them. That's when we end up with the displaced joints at times, as well as breaks within our pipe.
Councillor?
Thank you, through the chair. So those two are connected, the ground movement and the displaced pipe joint because of the heaving. Did I understand that correctly?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. While you noted perhaps something that has affected the average with the polar vortex, I believe in 2014 and 2015, I would like you to be able to comment on the freeze-thaw and whether you're concerned about or would wish to comment about climate change and what that might mean for those assets. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question through the chair. As you've noticed, in 2014, 2015, we did have quite a number of breaks due to the extreme cold temperatures, which affected the frost levels. That is something that we do monitor from year to year, and we have not seen those same frost levels in the past number of years. Hence, we haven't had quite the same number of breaks. Certainly, climate change is something that is happening, and it does affect our assets and our system. However, we're unable to predict necessarily what the frost levels are. Certainly, if depends on how much snow cover we get and the thaw and freeze cycles that we receive.
Thank you very much. I was wondering also if you could enlighten me on other. I'm looking in Ward 1, Aberdeen, Homewood, Parkside, and Franklin. For the mode of failure, it says other, and are those others all the same or are they separate others? Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you, and through the chair. Other often refers to breaks that were caused by contractors in the area that were doing work, and then they had to make replacement or repairs to that pipe.
Okay, thank you. So that's 20% caused by, less than 20%. 20% corrosion, 53% ground movement, and other would be a contractor. If I could shift through the chair to perhaps a larger asset management review of this. I think the chair rightfully noted that Ward 1 is not in an enviable position with 13% of breaks for 2022, but I do note Ward 1 through to 8 has 66% of the breaks. And I'm wondering if you could care to comment on that.
Yes, through the chair. As you can appreciate, those wards often will have the oldest water mains. And in preparation for this, looking at Ward 1 specifically, the average age of water mains in Ward 1 is 77 years versus the city as a whole averaging about 41 years age for water mains. So certainly as the water mains age, they're affected by corrosion and brittleness of pipes.
Thank you. So I'm going to repeat this question. My apologies to Director Leishman. Having said that, with that desperate profile of age, how do those facts inform our financing plan and our capital works? Please and thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Yes, good afternoon. Pat Leishman, Director of Corporate Asset Management, through the chair. Thank you for that great question. Lots of data in what you just said in terms of understanding age, understanding condition, understanding what needs to be done from a decision modeling perspective and how we need to move that forward. And there's lots of work underway to take us down those next steps. As we presented to Council last June, data is our biggest issue and the quality of that data. So there's a lot of work to do to improve that situation. At this point, we are continuing to do a lot of that work and looking at next steps in terms of what that modeling needs to look like and how we need to take that to the creation of the long-term financial plan. At this point, those conversations continue with Hamilton Water and the Corporate Asset Management Office, and we do have the next phase of the core asset management plan to bring forward to council for proposed levels of service by 2025. So, Councillor, I'm not sure I'm answering your question because there's a lot wrapped up in that, but know that there's a lot of work to do to decipher through all of that data to get to the point where we have a good understanding of priorities, decision modeling, and how to take that into a capital plan that is going to hit the immediate needs as well as provide long-term financial sustainability. The development of the long-term financial plan is the project charter has been drafted, and we're going to be working with finance to take that forward in terms of starting to develop that in a more fulsome manner.
Thank you, Director. Councillor?
I think I'm at my time, but I do have 2 additional questions.
So I'll put you down for a second time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danko, followed by Councillor Crutch, then Councillor Beattie, and second time Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to highlight a couple things in this report. I think residents would be surprised to find that we lose about a quarter of drinking water to losses through the system with a high in 2018 of 30.5%. And I think we've seen a consistent reduction year over year to this year. But I wanted to give staff an opportunity to highlight the proactive leak detection program. And that was begun, I think, in 2022. And some of the successes that we're seeing and what is the future of that program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. This is a program that we're very, very proud of. We've won awards for this program. And in 2022, as noted in the report, we did find 108 leaks, 73 of those being on the city side, and interestingly enough, 35 on private side. And these are ones that we're able to inform private landowners that they had leaks and we're able to repair them. The ones on city side, again, because of the type of soil that we have in many parts of our location, we wouldn't have seen these and wouldn't have known about them if it wasn't for the leak detection program that Manager Dave Alberton and his team have implemented. It's been a very successful program. We continue, as you see, reduce our non-revenue water, and it's a program that has been staffed and will be continuing on with that great work.
Thank you. And again, just highlighting that, you know, for the large scale of the entire water system, we know that we're losing a certain percentage through leaks in the system, but we don't know where unless we proactively go out and look for them. And up until very recently, up until this program, it was really hard to actually pinpoint and identify where a leak is. And as was just mentioned, a certain percentage of that we never find them because the water is just leaking into the groundwater and never reflecting to the surface. So you can have a permanent leak ongoing for years and years and not know about it. So I just think that, you know, highlighting the good work that our staff are doing through the protective leak program and the successes that it's had is, you know, it's just important that the general community, I guess, understands that there are good things happening in the Public Works Department and things that, you know, saving drinking water, saving money, and being as cost efficient as we can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up is Councillor Crutch.
Thank you. My first question through the chair is about you talk about Hamilton's unique geography in your report, and you say that leaks and breaks go undetected. What would it take to get us closer to sort of accommodate for that unique geography? It seems like we know that, and it's an important feature of why some of these things happen. But what would it take to get us to a place where we could accommodate for that knowledge and understanding?
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. That's exactly the purpose of our proactive leak detection program. And as we continue to resource that helps us to identify those things that you aren't going to see because of the land and the geography that we have. We also continue to look at other aspects of the program, including water theft. There's programs there to deal with people that may be stealing water. So there's a number of programs that take place, but specifically around those ones that we can't see, that's exactly what the proactive leak detection program is focused at.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had two other questions. So back to Councillor Maureen Wilson's point about the way that we invest in our infrastructure. Briefly, I'll say I was really surprised to learn, for instance, when it comes to sidewalks, we only measure sidewalk infrastructure investments based on length of sidewalk per ward. And so that means that Ward 2 gets 5.34% of the budget because we are the smallest geographical ward, despite the fact that we have the most seniors with disabilities who use sidewalks, we have the most use of sidewalks, and we have the most pedestrian areas. And so there's an equity piece missing from all of that. How do we look at this when we talk about our infrastructure here, right? How are we looking at equity issues here to Councillor Maureen Wilson's point? Are we looking at things like who is put out when there's a water main break? How we support areas where folks will have fewer means to bear the impacts of water main breaks? I specifically think of situations where we have a density of apartment buildings, for instance, with seniors and folks with disabilities and affordable housing buildings, those kinds of things. How are we looking at our investments here from an equity perspective?
Thank you.
Or are we?
GM Con.
Through the chair, Carl Alcan, General Manager of Public Works. I'll start the response, and I would invite Director Leishman or Director Winters to join in. As we go through this asset management journey, and we start to look at the infrastructure that we have, the age of the infrastructure, when it was built, the condition of it today, soil conditions, material types, we also look at, in that algorithm or in that equation, we look at equity too. So one of the things, and the easy example for me is when you look at a water main servicing a hospital, that would immediately bump it up as a critical asset. So within that equation, we're going to develop our matrices that we will then look at it through equity lens, look at the community that we're serving and how can we balance that out across the city.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, no, sorry, Director.
I think Director Leishman would like to add to that.
Please.
Yes, thank you, General Manager Ken. To add to that, Councillor, under Regulation 588, the city is required to have an asset management policy. Council approved that in 2017. It needs to be updated. It's not currently meeting the regulation, and we're bringing it to Council GIC in June. The draft currently has equity front and center in that new policy, that update. So you will see that shortly.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the anticipation. I look forward to seeing that. My last question is about some rudimentary math I did based on the information you provided in the report. I created a table based on every single kind of water main break, and so I could see the number of water main breaks per ward and the total cost for that, and then from there I was able to come up with an average cost. When I did that, I found a surprising thing. That in Ward 1, where there are 30 breaks, there's an average cost of $8,325. But in Ward 8, where there are half as many breaks, there's an average cost of twice as much, $17,474. And so there's a correlation here. I don't understand the correlation, but I look at the wards with the top two highest number of water main breaks. They have the lowest average cost. And then I look at two who have some of the lowest water main breaks, and they have the highest costs to do this kind of thing. So it strikes me as kind of odd. I don't know what kind of correlation that is, if it's bogus or otherwise interesting or not, but it just struck me as strange that would be the case. And if you could elaborate on that and explain this away, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Chair. It is interesting and interesting observations. I was just checking with Manager Alberton on some of this, and a good portion of the cost associated with water main breaks is related to restoration. And in some of the areas that you may have noticed, the water main breaks tend to be smaller, lower pressure, which don't cause as much surface disruption. And so the restoration costs may be considerably less. Where we have those larger breaks that cause major surface disruption, that can affect our restoration costs and be affected there. But if there's something that's specific, we're more than happy to take a look back.
Councillor?
No, I was just trying to figure out if you knew why there was such a high volume of costs in some wards based on per water main break, because there's only, the average is 15, right? So those around the average seem to be a lot higher of a cost than those double the average seem to be. I wonder if there was some strange bulk cost saving going on here. And so I guess the answer to that is no. You're suggesting that in some areas, it's the nature of the area, I suppose, the whole of Ward 8, I guess, where the kinds of breaks that happened during this period were like significant. And so then they caused there to be a lot higher of a cost. Or maybe there was 1 or 2 breaks that, for instance, were super significant, which drove the overall cost up. Just wondering, that's fine. I can send you this rudimentary table I made. Maybe you could just get back to me by email. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And over to Councillor Beattie, please.
Thank you, Chair Hannan. Through you, I wanted to ask a question that I think is similar to one that Councillor Maureen Wilson asked, and maybe staff might be able to tease it out a little further. I think it has citywide applications, but if I might use a ward-specific example to help tease out my question through you, Chair, I'm wondering in terms of if we have continual failures in a particular area on a particular street, if that changes the long-term plan for renewal in that area, if it expedites or changes the scheduled replacement of a particular asset. So I would use the example of Green Road in Ward 10. There's 4 incidents listed. I know that the area has kind of a notorious history for water main breaks, and I also know that the current capital replacement of that asset, I think, is in 2029. I'm wondering, as we unpack this data, if that changes or drives some kind of expediation, if that's a word. I don't think it's a word, Chair, but I think you understand the term that I'm going for.
It connects.
Does it quicken the pace of the assets replacement if we have continual failures? If I can ask that expediently through you.
Not on the word, but on the question.
Very nice. Through the chair, excellent question. Hamilton Water works very closely with our infrastructure renewal team with Jackie Kennedy, Director Kennedy. And as we have water main breaks, we keep track of those. Those get recorded in our work order management system, and all of that gets reported and coordinated with our infrastructure renewal. So if we have a particular segment of pipe that has increased number of water main breaks, all of that gets correlated, and it may impact the schedule for relining or rehabilitation, depending on what we're seeing in that area as part of the coordinated works that we do with infrastructure renewal.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. That's a great answer. I look forward to seeing Green Road replaced sooner than later. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. On to second-time speakers. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually was asked. Thank you to Councillor Kretsch. Just a comment, if I could, if that's appropriate now. Thank you. Speaking to budget decisions and capital reinvestment, it's why I've supported the elevation from 0.5 to, I think, 0.92, and also support a stormwater fee, because in the absence of adequately investing in our existing infrastructure, it costs us a whole bunch of money. It inconveniences our residents. And we're forever playing catch up. And I just don't think it's also a prudent financial practice. So I just wanted to make that note that there are reasons, in my opinion, for going the route that we are with respect to this budget that we'll be voting on March the 29th. And there is reason to staying that course. There is reason for committing. We must under the law, but really committing to and leaning in to asset management. And I am pleased that this council is going to commit to those staffing choices. And I think in terms of our core activities as a municipality, this is pretty fundamental. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to it. I want to thank staff for putting this report together. It's short, but it's very telling. Appreciate your work.
Thank you, Councillor, for those comments. So it's been moved and seconded. Now, if we could please get an electronic vote. Or thumbs up in the case of Councillor McMeekin. Councillor Francis says a thumbs up, and Councillor
I'm in favor. Sorry, mine's not working.
also in favor. And that carries. Moving on to 9.4, protected bike lane curbs, PW Report 23016. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive this item and open up discussion if there is any? Moved by Councillor Beatty, second by Councillor Crutch. Thank you. Any discussion? Hands are going up. I see Councillor M. Wilson, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Crutch.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one question from me. I do appreciate this explanation of the difference in the curb sizes. In the body of the report, it references a pilot. And so I acknowledge my ignorance. It's a pilot with respect to, I recall the testing of safety, whether it's the murals or safety features on the curbs. I'm wondering through you if staff could help me understand that better. What pilot, when, and where?
Sure. Over to Director Field, please.
Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance. Through the chair to the councillor. The reference to the pilot is the painting of the curbs to look at what it means to have decorative elements painted on curbs, or just having painted elements of those curbs in general. There's two reasons for painting curbs based on what the Hamilton Cycling Committee mentioned. One was to have them more visible to motorists, but also the second thing is having them as beautification of the public realm. The challenge with bike curbs, as you can understand, is that they're right next to the roadway. They'll get sprayed with salt and salt water and all that sort of thing, and just from road grime. So we want to have a better understanding of what that means to operate and maintain painted curbs before we go gung ho and paint them all. So that's the purpose of that pilot.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Director Field. The second part of the question, have you selected a location for the pilot, and when would it begin? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councillor. Excuse me, I think right now we're thinking of York Boulevard as being the place that we'd like to try those with the larger mini Jersey barrier curbs. I think it provides us good access to paint them, and they provide a good canvas for painting them.
That's a perfect location, and pink would be a perfect color. Thank you very much.
On to Councillor Kassar, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Nan. And just building off of that a little bit, because I think the recommendations from 2021. So if I reference Part B here, the pilot, to what's currently been done on Wilson Street with the new bike lanes where there is markings. So is that the same sort of idea? Because I know there was some feedback initially about those concrete barriers and they weren't visible, but there was markings to be added. So I'm just trying to understand what's been done there versus what's being proposed in B. Through the chair, please.
Through the chair to the councillor, increasing the visibility, I think, is a good thing across the board. Those are concrete barriers, obviously, and they can blend in with the roadway. So I think the primary purpose is to add some additional visibility of them. With the curbs in the city and with bike lanes in general, we've seen an evolution where it wasn't that long ago where we didn't have any curbing or physical protection of bike infrastructure, and now we went from small curbs to these larger curbs. So this is part of the evolution, and making sure that we have enough physical identification of those, not only for motorists but for cyclists too, that they can see those when they need to see them in low light conditions or what have you. So that's kind of the primary purpose, and then like I mentioned, the secondary purpose is to use if we can leverage that as a beautification piece of the bike lanes.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, totally appreciate both those points. Are there any examples in other jurisdictions where the painting as suggested has been tested or is in use? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councillor, City of Toronto has painted some of their bike curbs. So we do talk to our fellow municipalities. We don't want to invent something from new. We want to learn from their experiences. So part of our initiative was to touch base with other communities that have done painting, but it's an evolution. The curbing of bike lanes is evolution across the industry, and so everyone's trying different things and different techniques.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. Then another question around Part A about precast curb heights of no less than 25 centimeters tall where viable. So the way that's written, I get the idea why we want to have tall curbs and make them visible in concert with what you were just saying, but it also says where viable, so that leaves it open for when we maybe have less space, is how I read that, where we can or may still use shorter separating techniques. Is that a correct interpretation through the chair?
Through the chair to the councillor, I believe that's a correct interpretation. The where viable piece is the taller that the curb goes, the more the wider base it needs if they're precast curbs. So in a lot of scenarios, we don't have a lot of real estate when we're putting cycling lanes on an existing roadway to basically park those curbs. So we need to make sure that we have adequate space for them. We've experimented with different types of curbs, rubber curbs. The small precast curbs that we use today are actually a custom design that we developed within Hamilton that we have manufactured. It's an alteration to standard parking curb that you would have in a parking lot. And then we have larger mini jersey barrier curbs. So they all have different dimensions, different needs, and how they fit within the roadway. Having a taller curb is preferable for a variety of reasons. But it's a compromise between how much real estate's needed for those tall curbs. The report talks about the different types of curb we use today versus what we've used in the past. And our general practice going forward is looking at the level of risk of a cyclist and how much benefit there is to protect cycling lanes. So if it's high volumes, high speeds, we want to use the larger curbs, provide more substantive physical separation between vehicles and bikes. And then for roads that don't have as high of a risk, then maybe we can use the smaller curbs. So it's based on the location, the space that we have to install them, and a number of other factors when we're looking at those curbs. The one thing is that you can't easily pick up a catalog and pick curbs. It is challenging to find a source of materials, and often we've seen great examples of cycling curbs in Halifax, but we can't get our hands on that material. Or West Coast, for example, where it's just no local manufacturing for that type of curb. So I expect that to get easier as the industry kind of develops and those options become more readily available to this part of Ontario.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, Chair. So I guess there's no consumers distributing catalog
Not
for
yet.
bike curbs, and if you don't get that joke, then I hope you're enjoying your youth. Final question, in all seriousness, just around cost. I don't think there's anything in the report around cost. Just curious on incremental cost. Is it significant to take that new stance on 25 centimeters? Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, there is obviously incremental material cost. They're not out of the book, so anything that we're talking about is custom fabricated, and that would come at a cost. We haven't done industry research on what that would be at this moment. There's no curb on the market that you can select that is 25 centimeters, so that's a bit of a challenge. The curbing that we use today is relatively inexpensive, all things considered, because we have a local manufacturer who is able to provide and supply that type of curbing. Like I mentioned, if we're importing curbing from a different part of Canada, just because of what it is, it's very heavy and bulky, then the delivery costs are going to be quite expensive.
Thank you.
If I may, just one supplemental then. So in 2023, what impact does that have to, well, I guess there's not going to be additional budget ask, I would imagine. So does that mean working within the existing budget with less separation? And then going forward, does that reduce the amount do you expect we'll be able to accomplish in terms of separated bike lanes?
Thank you.
Got Brian, Director Hollingworth, with me today. I don't know if he has anything different to say about the plans for this year, but we assess it based on the need. first of all, and then we're selecting the curbing based on what we believe is most suitable for that facility. That's the first primary thing. So when we're going forward and we're doing the planning and the budgeting of those projects, we're making some pre-presumptions on what type of curbing or physical separation would be existing. So I don't think that there would be that much of a budgetary impact to this. That said, when we do introduce changes to materials, that can come at an additional cost. But when you look at locations where we're installing curbing, such as Wilson Street, the installation of curbing and bike lanes on that type of project are a small, tiny fraction of the overall cost of the project. So even if we saw some cost escalation, it'd probably be invisible to the overall cost of the project.
Thank you. Thank you for those responses. Over to Councillor Crouch.
Thank you, and I've just 100 questions, but I'll try and get to 2. Bike lane curbs are a big deal in Ward 2, where there's just every kind of bike lane curb. And so my first question for you is, you talked about the Hamilton curb that you're talking, I know which one you're talking about, it's this lightish kind of gray. I know exactly which one. Yeah. That is right now going along Bay Street, for instance, right? Which is, I'm not sure how you qualify that, but I classify that as a dangerous area, Bay Street, as a dangerous place to cycle, period. But we're using the kinds of curbs which frankly are most easily injured, I would say, right? So if a truck bangs into it, or if it is impacted, the curb is impacted, it usually cracks. And sometimes cracks right in half, and sometimes goes right into the bike lane. These kinds of things happen on a regular basis. So how are you balancing, I guess, the pedestrian mobility aspect here in terms of, or the cycling mobility aspect here in terms of like that as a danger? Because the road traffic thing is one danger, but in an area where there's perhaps a lot of potential breakage, that's going to create problems for pedestrians and for folks using the cycling lane. So how do you factor that into the decisions you're making?
Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, that's a great observation. I've seen some of your Twitter posts where you had your foot on the curb and taken a picture of some broken curbs. They are susceptible if they are struck by a vehicle. They can be dismounted, displaced, and broken for sure. I would phrase it as the evolution. Prior to those curbs, Bay Street, I believe, had nothing and had some rubber curbs, which were completely useless for many, many reasons. Yeah. So as we use those different curbs, like I was mentioning, it's not like we can pick these out of a catalog, so it's quite challenging to source material for these things. We install them and we learn from that installation of what works and what doesn't work. If we redid Bay Street today, Bay Street would receive the large curbs that we put on York Boulevard. And also some of the projects that you see that we've undertaken in the past with the help of Director Hollingworth's team is upgrading existing facilities where we have removed the rubber curbing on Cannon Street and we've put in cast-in-place curbs or larger curbing. So that's kind of the evolution piece of this whole discussion that I was mentioning before. So as we learn from those situations, and you bring up a good point where maybe that's not a great curb, suited for that type of installation, work really good somewhere else, but maybe not here. So we learn from that, adapt from it, and go on from there.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks. I imagine some of this has to do with funding, but so I'll leave the 300 questions attached to that for somewhere else. But my last question is about bike lane literacy, and so this may be a new subject. Who knows? But cyclist literacy is an important thing in terms of the legibility of what's happening in front of you as you're cycling. And so everyone is at different levels of skill when they're on a bicycle. And so we should be planning for the person who's the first time on their bicycle and they're using these things. And when you have a totally different set of curbs, a totally different set of signals, different shapes of arrows, different bikes, different signs, different ways to get from one place to the next, all within the connected cycle network, right? This creates a literacy issue for I would say, not only cyclists, but I would say pedestrians, people who are driving, everybody. how close are we getting to closing the literacy gap so that we can have a consistent standard? Because what you said earlier was basically, if I understand you, the only issue we have with the base width issue is when we're talking about precast, right? When we're talking about doing this right in place, concreting right into the road, the height and the base elements are slightly different, and it's less of a problem. And so when are we going to get to, or how do you feel about how close we're going to get to a place where we get a consistent bike infrastructure that sends a consistent signal to people as they're cycling, so it just overall helps everybody who's using our roads?
Thank you. Director?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's a great point you're making. When it comes to traffic infrastructure, it doesn't matter if it's for vehicles or bikes. Consistency is really important. You want to have, excuse me, you want to have a bike lane that's in Stoney Creek look identical to the bike lane that's in Dundas, so that literacy is there for both drivers and cyclists. That does come along with the recent upgrades to some of the Ontario traffic manuals, Book 18, which is cycling, where it's starting to embed some standardization across the country on what things can look like. When it comes to the treatments that we select, we have been doing a lot of experimenting and trying, this or that, and it's created, those situations that you've pointed out where it looks really different from one cycling facility to the next. Obviously not a desirable state for us. I do believe that we're getting to a point where standardization is something that we're getting better with, and I'll just make mention of the recently or forthcoming approval possibly of the integrated cycling team, active transportation team. That team will help to ensure there's consistency from one project to the next. They will be, they'll be responsible for planning the bike lanes, setting the standards, and constructing those bike lanes as a team. So I think that will have a lot of positive outcomes when it comes to discussions such as this, as standardizing on look and feel of cycling facilities. I'll just leave it, the best cycling facility that we can construct when we're talking about curbs is a cycling facility that is not on the road. That is the safest type of facility, whether that's a raised cycling lane, which is what we're going to see some in Hamilton, or a completely off-roadway cycling lane. So that's another, evolution that we'll see. So you're going to see a bunch of different types of lanes that are unprotected, just with pavement markings, and ones with curbs, and ones that are raised, and ones that are on pathways. So there'll always be some differences between facilities, but standardization is really important to roadway safety and user literacy, to your point.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that, and appreciate through the chair your explanation with respect to the facilities. And I think that a macroscopic view sometimes of the word cycling facility sometimes may be helpful, because one facility, i.e. block, will sometimes interact with the next block, and it's going from a 2-lane to a 1-lane, and a this to a that, and so as we continue to build continuity across the network so that we can have a connected network, I think it's going to be essential to whatever that connected network eventually looks like, it looking and feeling and being somewhat similar. Thanks for your answer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded and before committee for approval. That carries. Thank you. Moving on to 9.5, 2022 year-end report on community bookings at the Tim Horton Field, PEW report 18075B. May I please get a mover and seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Pauls, thank you. Seconded by myself. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, if I could just a comment through you, Vice Chair Pauls. Just wanted to thank Manager of Sports and Entertainment, Rob Gatto, Manager of Sports and Entertainment Facilities, Rob Gatto, for the work done since moving the direction and seeing a desired outcome by the community for ensuring the Tim Hortons field as a municipal facility remains accessible to the community. So seeing a significant uptake there in terms of number of bookings, but also as it relates to the field and just overall the ongoing responsiveness of manager and his team there in addressing the local community's needs. And thanks for being part of the Ward 3 office's community meeting as it relates to addressing some of the neighborly concerns as it relates to noise, garbage, that some of our vendors, as well as a result of some of the TICAC games as well. So thank you to staff there.
You could take
back the chair, and we're at the point of a vote to receive the report. That carries, thank you. 9.6 is temporary road official role, PW report 21-013A. May I please get a mover and seconder to receive the item? Thank you, Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you. Any discussion on this report, colleagues? Seeing none, then it's before committee for approval. That carries, thank you. Moving on to 9.7, Emerald Ash Borer Management Plan, 10-year summary, PW report 21-023A. Could I get a mover and seconder for this report to be received? Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Thank you both. And first up is Councillor Danko on the speaker's list.
Thank you, Chair. So the emergence of the Emerald Ash Borer in Ontario is really one of those black swan events that nobody could have foreseen or planned for, resulting in the loss, almost the complete loss, of a cornerstone Carolinian tree species in Hamilton. I think if you went back 10 years and you told some of your future self that every single, or almost every single ash tree in the city of Hamilton was going to be dead and have to be removed, I think that would result in some shock. And, you know, thinking about ash trees as a species, just the cultural significance that it would be if this could have just as easily been the emerald maple borer and what that would have done, and the, you know, the attachment to the sugar maple and the maple industry. So looking at this report, this is a 10-year unforeseen cost that was estimated to be almost $25 million in order to deal with this. Ended up being under budget by $3.7 million, coming in just over $21 million. Seeing now that we're closing out this project and the ongoing work is being shifted to the Forestry and Horticulture Department, I wanted to give maybe staff an opportunity just to, you know, acknowledge the really good work that they've done and the magnitude of this problem and what it took to deal with it, and planting all the new species, and how we're trying to make our urban forestry canopy more resilient in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. I'll start, and then if I have any gaps in my answer, I've got Robin Pollard, our Manager of Forestry and Horticulture, here to answer any additional questions. So through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. I think the piece about resiliency and biodiversity is critical, and we've really embodied those principles in our tree planting efforts in the last 10 years. Certainly, we do require that there is diversity in planting plans, both on city projects as well as through developments. We implement those principles with our own street tree plantings and plantings in parks and cemeteries in order to try and ward off similar pretty devastating, die-offs within a certain species. Certainly, this is not unprecedented in Ontario. I think back to Dutch elm disease, which had a very similar effect, particularly on streetscapes in Ontario. And so we just want to be sure that going forward, we have as much biodiversity and resiliency as we can. And I'll just let Robin fill in any gaps.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Robin Pollard, Manager of Forestry and Horticulture. I'm not sure that there was a lot of gaps there, so I think the fact that staff came in under budget, delivered on all of the expectations, I think is immense. I think it's definitely something that's appreciated. I've only been part of it since 2018, so prior to that, I think there's a lot of work that was done. There's been a lot of project managers. There's been a lot of arborists involved, and I appreciate the fact that you took note that there was a significant amount of work done by a significant amount of people within Public Works, and yeah, I think we all appreciate all of it. I don't think that it could have gone much better than it did. Coming in under budget, delivering on what was needed. The 4,000 plus extra trees we put in, still coming in under budget, I think is significant.
Thank you, Manager and Acting Director. Over to you, Councillor.
No, thank you. And you know, I didn't want to highlight it as a success because, I mean, it is an ecological disaster. Nonetheless, a disaster that we as a city had no choice but to meet, and having our staff exceed the removal and replacement targets, I think is, you know, some good news in a dark situation that I think we should highlight as a committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Over to you, Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you very much. I think two questions. I just want to make sure I understand Director Graham's response of, and perhaps Manager Robin's response of what we have learned from this tragedy, and I appreciate the work that has been done, coming in under budget, certainly. But how will it be? What have we learned from it, and how will it be informing the city's work in the future? I know Credit River Watershed has put out a notice that oak wilt is maybe 500 kilometers from the Canadian border. I know some arborists who don't want to be planting oak tree for that reason, which in my mind is the most perfect tree. But what have we learned from this, and how will it inform our urban tree strategy moving forward? Through the chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I think some of the recent efforts that our staff have taken to identify future threats to trees coming forward from various locations, usually from the south of us, moving northward. A recent example was a communication update that highlighted a future threat of the hemlock woolly adelgid and the spotted lanternfly. Staff will continue to do that work to try and identify those pests as they move forward, and if and when necessary, we will provide an action plan. Not every species is going to require the type of effort and level of removals and replanting as the emerald ash borer did, just based on our canopy and our tree species diversity in Hamilton. it's hard to predict what those impacts might be at this time, but we can make the commitment that we will bring forward the action plans as we need to, similar to as staff did 10 years ago on this program.
Thank you.
Thank you. My second question, and I want to express my appreciation to Manager Robin in advance for communicating with me over the weekend. Not necessary, but appreciated. The sensitivity, I think that we are all, we're becoming much more appreciative of the inequitable canopy that is present in the city of Hamilton and the susceptibility of more urban neighborhoods to climate, particularly in the northern part of the city, in our industrial areas, where there is industry, beg your pardon. So if I could ask the manager, Robin, to just speak to the way in which we've tracked the replacement to ensure that perhaps we are addressing that equity or lack thereof component in our replanting, and how we might be tracking those efforts in the future, perhaps with mapping or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager?
So through the chair, we had a criteria of how to replace trees. The program had a one-to-one replacement, so if a tree was removed, a replacement had to be planted. That was the minimum requirements. The way that staff did this was if a tree was removed, it was replanted, if possible, in the same location. Not always possible. We had situations in which a homeowner didn't want the tree. Maybe there was something else there, gas line, something else that stopped us from planting that tree. At that point, we looked at adjacent properties, and then from there, we went within the ward. So that was the criteria of replacing a tree one for one within, at the very least, within the ward. So that was that criteria. The second part of your question was sorry, if you can clarify it for me.
Thank you. My understanding when we communicated is you reviewed the purchase orders, ensured it was within the ward. We didn't do perhaps any mapping, and we'll be doing that just to ensure we're addressing some vacancies in our tree canopy moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, apologies, through the chair. So in the beginning of the program in 2012, we were not mapping this. So we were using a work order system that was not associated to anything other than just an address. So we didn't have a geospatial address. So we were not mapping a specific tree on a visual map. It was in a work order system. In 2017, we moved over to a GIS system. So every tree removed would have gone into the GIS system, been mapped, and we can show where that tree exactly was removed from. In 2018, we started trialing it, but in 2019, we started mapping every single tree that was planted. So it was a gradual movement to this technology. At this point, we now have every tree that's planted within the city of Hamilton is mapped, and all removals are also mapped. So as we move forward, we have a much better tool. We'll be much better prepared. We can provide better visuals, but we have a better management tool at that point.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I am appreciative of the growing understanding of the importance of our tree canopy, its susceptibility to the different impacts that our changing climate are having on it, and that it will likely have to be reflected more so in our budget as we move forward. Thank you. Thank you to staff.
Thank you. And that completes our speakers list. So it's been moved and seconded and before committee to receive. That carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 9.8 is the intersection control list, PW report 23001 for wards 1, 3, and 4. May I please get a mover and seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Thank you. A. Wilson. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Crutch?
Thank you. New to this topic, intersection control. So there's not a report here. It's just kind of intersection control. So I wondered if you could briefly just say more about those two words for me, and also identify perhaps why Ward 2 is skipped. It's like 1, 3, 4. And so I wondered if you could unpack that for me.
Totally on purpose, just joking. Over to you, Director.
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you. Also referred to as the ICL, if you would like to further muddy it. This is the way, we have the bylaw introduction of stop controls for intersections. So this is the way that we do that. It has to have council's approval. The identification of new stop signs can come from a bunch of different ways. One of them is work that we do internally, and another way are requests from councillors. I believe in this case these are some suggestions or some requests from either citizens or councillors to add some stop signs on a street. This is the method for us to deliver this. There's no accompanying report with it, apart from having a comments field of some marks there. I'm just looking at it. Currently an uncontrolled intersection. So 3 of those locations are ones that we've identified where there isn't currently any stop controls, which are required by the Highway Traffic Act. So we're doing some cleanup.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I'm curious about the criteria applied to these different things, because of course, when a councillor may be submitting some information to you saying, you know, I've heard from these umpteen residents about this thing, one resident is complaining about a certain thing. I'm sure you use a criteria to determine when you are going to do these, if our control is required or not, and that kind of stuff. And so I think that, I know that I'm sure you're doing, I'm just thinking a report might help with some of that information in terms of making it easier to understand from my perspective. But thank you for your answer. I understand now what you mean by this and exactly what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I could get a vote now that it's been moved and seconded. No further speakers. Carries, thank you. Moving on to discussion items. We are at 11.1, accessing the Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee Reserve. And there is a citizen committee report there. May I please get a mover and seconder to put the report on the table for approval. Thank you, Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor M. Wilson. Thank you both. Any questions? On the speakers list, we see Councillor M. Wilson's hand is up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a single question. If I recall the report, it referenced storage for waste, I think, that there was a peeling and they want to apply something. My only question is, they referenced that the storage facility was stored outside and that precipitated the need for this action. And I guess my question is there no place inside to store it? Thank you, through the chair.
Over to you, Acting Director.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. The Keep Hamilton Clean and Green program is coordinated through my team. I do understand that these clean and green trailers are stored, as you mentioned, outside. I would have to do a review of alternative locations indoors, but my understanding is that at this time, no, there isn't capacity in a convenient location that would be indoors, that it's possible, but I can connect with my team and see about whether that's a possibility or not.
Thank you, Councillor. That's fine. Okay. So to be clear, that it's from the committee report is seeking to access reserve budget amount $9,955.30 to have the clean and community clean trailers rewrapped in vinyl and to support a marketing budget not to exceed $2,000 to promote community clean trailer program. And that's before committee for approval. Please vote. And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to 11.2, standardization of waste mobile and web application, PW 23013. Could I get a mover and seconder for this app? Just joking, for the report. Recommendations. Moved by Councillor A. Wilson. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McMeekin. Seeing no speakers, it's before committee for approval. That carries. Moving on to 11.3, wastewater quality management system operational plan summary report, PW 23017. Could I get a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Seconded by, not so enthusiastically, Councillor Francis. Any questions or comments? Okay, Director Winters, if you could please introduce the report, and then we'll see if colleagues have any questions.
Certainly, Chair Nan, thank you for the opportunity. So this is the first of two reports that contain an operational plan, and this one is for our wastewater quality management system. When we put these in front of new council after every election, the wastewater quality management system was first endorsed by council back in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. It's been updated based on some revisions within the Hamilton water structure that have been made since that time, but it also provides an overview of how we manage our wastewater business within the confines of our quality management system. The recommendations are that the endorsement page be signed by Mayor Horvath, the city clerk, General Manager Can, and myself. And I think that's the summary. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary. Any questions, colleagues? Seeing none, it's before you for approval.
Councillor Spadafora, are you able to vote?
And that carries. Moving on to 11.4, the Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan Summary Report, PW 23019. Councillor Jackson moving it, Councillor Francis seconding it. Any further introduction, or did you cover it all?
Thank you, Chair Nan. I would just mention this is the same concept on the drinking water side, a little different terminology because of differences in the quality management standards, but it is essentially the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Director. No questions. It's before committee for approval, please.
Councillor Spadafora.
Councillor Spadafora. Thank you. And that carries. Moving on to 11.5, alternation to Kenora Avenue and Brancroft Street for GO Confederation Station construction in Ward 5, not Ward 4, PW 23018. Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Thank you. Acting Director Mike Field, did you want to introduce the report?
Certainly, through the chair to the councillor, my deep regrets in making the mistake with the ward. It was caught too late. But we do know which ward is which, despite the report. This report is recommending or seeking approval to modify the intersection of Bancroft Street and Kenora Avenue in Ward 5. This is needed to enable the construction of the GO Confederation station. That station requires a third rail track to be added to service the platforms that are going to be constructed. There's Transport Canada regulations that speaks to how close intersections can be to rail tracks. So when that third track is introduced, the intersection is thereby too close to the rail tracks. So we needed to do something to make that right and pass the regulations. Initially, there was discussion between Metrolinx and CN and us about closing the intersection completely, which we obviously identified as not a preferred option because of the use of Kenora, particularly because it has a really busy waste transfer station on the other side of the railway tracks. So we came up with this scenario where we are cul-de-sacing Bancroft Street, so it is no longer a through street, and thereby kind of removing the intersection altogether, which provides adherence with the Transport Canada regulations. The other thing I'll point out too is that since this work is required for the Confederation GO Transit Station, the city will not have any costs on this at all. So the cost of design and construction will be borne by Metrolinx and CN, and they will be constructing it as well. So to the satisfaction of the city, of course.
Good news all around. Seeing no speakers at this time, so it's before committee for approval. The enthusiastic thumbs up by Councillor McMeekin. Councillor Crutch is submitted. Carries, thank you. On to motions. It's a long list. Colleagues, so get ready. And we're going to try and get through them. And so I'm going to remind my colleagues that there's a 5-minute speaking time limit. Try to get it in with the first time. Let's try and get everything done within one speaker's list if possible. Going on to the first motion, 12.1, review of service level for winter control in alignment with principles of Vision Zero. Councillor Spatafora, please introduce your motion. I understand that Councillor M. Wilson will be seconding it.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to, through you, ask about the amendment that we want to put to the motion. In talks with several of my colleagues and obviously Mr. Nolan and a few other people, we'd like to amend the motion. So how would you like me to do that? I know I currently have the motion that I think is in front of you as well, but looking to add a few sentences to amend the motion.
So just bear with me for a moment. So clerk, do you have recommendations of integrating the amendments that we heard during the delegation?
Madam Chair, what I'm sharing now is the original. And then I have the amendments suggested.
Sorry, Chair. Clerk, I just sent you an email to add 2 amendments to it, if that works. Makes it easier.
Yeah, it's always great when it's sent to the clerk with the amendments in it. And just bear with us for a second. We're going to pop it up.
And Councillor, could you advise you would like this as item D and E in the recommendation?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll look to the chair to make sure that and my seconder to make sure that works. Councillor Wilson.
Okay, so you're adding a D to your therefore be it resolved that staff consult persons with disabilities and seniors, including but not solely limited to the advisory committee for persons with disabilities and the senior advisory committee when reviewing the snow clearing needs of the community, and E, that staff report back in the full comments and opinions of the disability and seniors advisory committees, communities, including the committee for persons with disabilities and seniors advisory committees. There's an and there, but I think we don't need the and, correct?
No,
Clerk?
correct.
And Councillor Spatafora, are you adding anything into the whereas clauses as well? There was a reference to a...
I don't believe we were, no.
Okay, got it. All right, so the motion has been edited, and you are moving this, and your seconder agrees. And then we have a speakers list open after, if you wanted to make some comments to your motion. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to first off thank yourself, Chair Nan, and a few, Councillor Wilson, and a couple other councillors that I spoke to help come up with this motion. Obviously, we've heard a lot about snow clearing and some of the challenges we've had. And I also want to thank Mr. Nolan, who reached out, and I was able to have a conversation with and discuss, adding some of these amendments. And lastly, Director Field, who has helped with this motion, but has also done a tremendous job trying to navigate this challenging time we have with our snow removal issues. So yeah, looking for support here from committee, and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor M. Wilson. And a reminder to my colleagues, the speakers list is open. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to Councillor Spatafora for all his work on this motion. I'm just seeking just a comment perhaps from the councillor or Director Field on the consultation, the first amendment. It suggests that it's not exclusive to the two advisory committees, and therefore it could open it up to a broader intentional consultation, or is it if we as members of council are in receipt of individual emails? I'm just a little, I'm wondering if it could be considered, if the mover would just consider it to the advisory committees. Otherwise, it has to be a very intentional outreach. So that would be my minor, I think, friendly amendment.
Okay, so not a question in terms of just, a friendly amendment back to the mover. Would you consider keeping the consultation to the advisory committees? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate your work.
Okay. Councillor Cassar.
Thank you, Chair Nan. And this may have been covered in the delegations. I apologize, I missed them. I just had a minor family emergency. Everything's okay. But my question is, and I heard a little bit at the end of the last delegation about curb cuts and not being cleared because of the windrow there. And I think, at least for me, windrow is a new word I've learned this winter. I think some of us are in that boat as well. The snow that's left by a plow blocking a driveway or a curb cut, as was mentioned. So to Councillor Spatafora, is the intention for staff to be looking into windrows and what may be done throughout the city, or for seniors or for other groups? Is that part of the intention here in this review, through the chair?
To Acting Director? Or to the mover of the motion?
Yeah, to the mover. Okay. Is that the intention? And then to staff, is that how it is interpreted? Yeah.
Okay, first to you, Councillor, and then over to staff.
Yeah, I believe that there is, the intention is to review all aspects that are going to make the roads safer and more accessible for everyone. But I will definitely let Director Field comment that the way the motion's written is going to allow that. And if it's not, then we need to change it to make sure that that's covered under the review. I'm open to that.
Thank you. Acting Director Field.
Through the chair to the councillor, I think it's implicit to the way that it's written, particularly how we can adapt our operations to enhance accessibility. For me, that is talking about curb cuts and that sort of thing. There is a difference, though. I'll just point out that the city, through our sidewalk snow clearing program, we don't clear all of those curb cuts. Some of them are required to be cleared by residents or property owners. So there is a bit of difference from that respect. But generally, I would say that it's all-encompassing. And there were some comments, really appreciate the delegations earlier. There's some comments about Vision Zero, and there's a real solid connection between this motion and Vision Zero, that's for sure. And Vision Zero looks to protect the most vulnerable road users, which includes, you know, people with mobility challenges for sure. And when you see photos, I think we've all seen them during a winter storm where there's someone either in a wheelchair or a walker using the road instead of the sidewalk because the road is inaccessible. That is fundamentally in opposition of the principles of Vision Zero. And that's how the Vision Zero lens is applied to this and why it makes an appearance. So if you think about it in that context, we want to enable accessibility and people to use sidewalks to get from where they want to go in a safe manner, that they're not having to make decisions that puts them in an unsafe condition. So that would include crosswalks and curb cuts and all those sorts of things, for sure.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. That's clear there. I would also expand my question to include just private driveways. And let me explain, is we've had lots of calls, I think because of the heavy nature of the snow. It's been a lot of snow, it's been a lot of moisture, it's been very heavy, and have had contact, our office has received contact from many, mostly elderly people who aren't able to remove the snow. And I know we've done some research, and that some other municipalities provide services. It may not be carte blanche to everybody, but services to remove the windrows. Maybe there's a fee involved, maybe there isn't. So same question, the way this motion is being interpreted, would looking at potential services for windrows on private driveways be part of what we're doing here, or does that need to be something separate? Through the chair, thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, that's not considered in the theme of the way that this is written. I have had some discussions with Director Elder, who's the Director of Ontario Works, about revising the Snow Angels program to provide more options for people who can't clear their driveways and windrows. I know she is drafting that report for sometime in the near future, but the way that this is written, we wouldn't be considering clearing people's driveways.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Director Field, and through the chair, that's what I anticipated. Just wanted to be clear, didn't want to put words in anyone's mouth. So I think it is an important topic. I think it's a separate topic that should be addressed at another time. So I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for that update. Next up, we have Councillor McMeekin.
Yes, thanks, Chair Nan. I think perhaps we have an answer already, but let me just, for emphasis, suggest I think we need to be intentionally as broad as we can with this review. Two very specific areas that I would mention in my ward that were created a number of difficulties. One was the unassumed roads, a lot of construction going on there, and the developers following up. People who pay money, buy a house, move in, expect their garbage and their snow to be done, and it's really the developer that screws up. But we need to make sure that that practice is altered considerably, and maybe that's fines or some way of going in there. The other has to do, Mr. Fields, with the car problem. I can't emphasize how often somebody called and said, darn it, my road is so narrow, there's only one lane clear. And I say, well, can you get your car out? And I even had one woman say to me, well, I parked it out in front of my driveway so I wouldn't get a windrow, and now I'm having trouble getting my car out, So we have these signs up about snow routes. You can't park when there's a snow route. I'm not even sure we enforce that. That's one question I would ask. The other would be, can we find a way, I mean, for the 3 or 4, maybe at maximum 5 winter events where we might declare, a special interest, get the darn cars off the road. I mean, even if it's insisting they only park on one side, these roads where you got 2-side parking and, it's like a laneway in central Hamilton, in terms of trying to, it's infuriating. And I think we need to, my preference would be to get all cars off the road on those 3 or 4 events. I know in the city of Guelph, they don't allow any parking on the roads at night. And, there may be some difficulties with that, but I want to put that on the table. I think we need to at least be looking at roads and how we can do a better job there as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Pauls and then myself.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And through the chair, Director Mike Field, can you just explain what windrows are? Because I've had a lot of people can't understand why we don't do it. What are they? So I'm clear. I'm hearing it's a driveway. Is it the end of the driveway? Can you explain it to the public?
New F word.
Through the chair to the councillor, I will try my best. The windrow is what comes off of the plow blades, and it's not specific to driveways. It's the mound of snow that is left from the plow blades. I do have Peter Sonolis, who's the manager of roadway maintenance, and maybe he has a more, a better definition than I have.
Thank you. Councillor?
Do you have a better explanation? Oh,
Sorry,
no.
my apologies.
Peter Sniolis, Manager of Roadway Maintenance, through the chair. So Mike made the statement perfectly. It's just the mound of snow that comes off the plow when it's going around. So we do have our plows maintain a certain speed when they're going through residential neighborhoods to try to reduce that and pushing it onto driveways, but it's not just in front of driveways. It can be crosswalks, as Councillor McMeekin was talking about earlier, or it's just anywhere across the city, but that is the technical term.
Okay, so when somebody shovels their driveway, it's done, then the snow comes and it blocks them in. Is that it? Is there any way we could figure out how to put the blades so it doesn't do that when you get to, I don't know. Is there a way we could mitigate that or no?
So through the chair, there are certain options on reducing or completely eliminating the possibility of windrows. They do come at a cost to do that. One is a plow gate where they physically drop the arm. It'll clear the snow and then they'll lift it. They'll go to the next driveway and do it. The other option is more with a chemical type burn where you use more additional salt to mitigate that as well. With either of these options do come costs and do come issues with timing of that service being completed and also damage to residents' driveways. Actually, and a third option would be an additional contractor or service to follow up with that first plow push, but that again, that becomes timing issues and additional cost as well.
Yeah, everything is additional cost, right? I had a lot of residents, urgent appointments that couldn't get out, had someone, their car got, so there's cost anyways, but I understand now what it means. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Keep your microphone on. Relinquishing the chair to you. And just wanted to say thank you to the mover and seconder as well as to Mr. Nolan for the proposed amendments. I think it's been really clear since the very first iteration of this conversation about sidewalk snow removal that this is a discussion about mobility equity across our city. And I think it was clear to know also that in the first round of implementation, we would get a lot of feedback from lived experience, and this will help inform the level of service moving forward. So really appreciating the direction here, and also want to say thank you to staff for bearing the brunt of the complaints over the course of the multiple snowstorms this season and helping propose language that enables us to get to where we're looking for the level of service to be consistently as it meets equity as well as Vision Zero. So that's it. Those are my only comments.
You can take the chair back then?
Thank you. I'll take back the chair, Councillor McMeekin, a second time.
Yeah, just very briefly. I'm wondering, because conversations with our wonderful.
Yeah, Councillor McMeekin, your microphone, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. In conversations with our senior staff, there were situations where there was clearly, I hesitate to call it an emergency situation, but, the 92-year-old guy with a heart condition is, or someone who's maybe recovering from a knee surgery or something like that. I don't know.
Just for example.
For example, but would it be possible, my spouse was very good at trying to get that windrow done, but she's a tiny thing, so it was pretty tough. Anyhow, would it be possible to create, we have the Snow Angels program. People apply for that if they have a disability or a particular interest. Would it be possible for us to assist by mirroring that in some way? Like maybe there were 196 people in the whole city of Hamilton whose circumstances would warrant a small piece of machinery going by and cleaning out their windrow because of their health condition or something like that. I know you've been doing some of that on an ad hoc basis. I wonder if there's some merit maybe to looking at making that selectively. I'm not talking about everybody, but selectively available to people who qualify. You'd have to define what qualification would mean. I would throw that out.
In the context of the motion, or is it as a conversation piece moving forward?
We're having a general conversation here. The staff have already indicated it's going to be a broad-based review, so I trust that. But I'm just offering that up as a practical suggestion for those cases which are really heartbreaking when you think about it.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's a quick response, yeah.
Through the chair to the councillor, just quickly, I made reference to Director Elder's report coming forward of the next phase or the change of the Snow Angels program. That will do, from my understanding, what you're asking for.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So the motion has been moved and seconded and spoken to. Our speakers list is exhausted. Please vote. Survey says it carried. Okay, so Councillor A. Wilson, could I ask you to just hold on a second? Would you entertain Councillor Crutch being able to introduce his motion as he's got a meeting to get to in 5:15? Thank you. So within 15 minutes, we're going to entertain 12.5 first, and then we'll go back into sequential order. Fair? Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Crutch.
I'll be quick. This is just about installing a Pride crosswalk at the intersection of 4 Pride crosswalks at the intersection of King William Street and Ferguson Avenue in Ward 2. And so Councillor Maureen Wilson is going to be my seconder for this. I don't think it requires a lot more explanation than that. This has been a project that's been going on for a while now. It's just at the installation phase, and so they have to just put the material onto the road, and this allows to pay for the material being put onto the road from the Ward 2 Area Rating Reserve Fund. It's all there in the motion, so carefully typed. That's it for me.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. No speakers on the speakers list before committee for approval. That carries. Thank you. Now over to you, Councillor A. Wilson, for item 12.2, please.
Thank you. And yes, this is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kassar. It's about a new pathway that's being proposed by the Rockton Lions Club at cost to them, not the city, to enhance that existing arena. So they're interested in making a charitable donation, but we need some staff time to review that process, to look at where the path could go, and to help with the design phase of the process. So this motion breaks down what that review looks like and how we're going to work together to make this enhancement happen. So really exciting, and it's right there in the motion in front of us, but be it resolved that staff be directed to review the feasibility and design of a new pedestrian path at the Beverly Community Park, located at 680 Highway 8 in Flamborough, and to support the development of agreements needed for the donation to be funded by the Rockton's Lions Club. Staff report back, and that the General Manager of Public Works be authorized and directed to approve and execute any and all required agreements and auxiliary documents related to the review of the feasibility of design of a new pedestrian path.
Excellent. No speakers on the speakers list, so it's duly moved and seconded before committee for approval. And Councillor Danko is indicating his vote in favor. 12.2.
Okay.
Thank you, that carries. So if I could pass the chair on to
Yes.
Vice Chair Pauls, thank you.
Councillor, 12.3, go ahead.
Thank
with your
you.
motion.
First up, I have a few back-to-back here. So number one is community garden and outdoor natural ice rink, water infrastructure improvements at Burge Park at 167 Burge Street in Hamilton in Ward 3. The whereas clauses are indicated there, but really this is looking to increase water access and to implement the infrastructure improvements that are needed in order to enable watering of the community gardens that are currently already in place there, as well as enabling flooding and creating a community ice rink, which residents in the community are ready to volunteer and make happen. So therefore be it resolved, the water infrastructure improvements for a community garden and natural outdoor ice rink, including an ice rink hut at Burge Park at 167 Burge Street, Hamilton, be funded from the Ward 3 Special Capital Reinvestment Reserve Account, number 108053, at an upset limit, including contingencies not to exceed $150,000. That the annual operating impacts for the required maintenance and repairs for the natural outdoor ice rink and water infrastructure at Burge Park in the amount of $8,000 be included in the 2024 Public Works Department base operating budget. And C, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to approve and execute required agreements and ancillary documents related to the water infrastructure improvements for the community garden and natural outdoor ice rink at Burge Park at 167 Burge Street in Hamilton, with such terms and conditions in a form that's satisfactory to the city solicitor. And the other piece of this motion is it does also address an inequity in terms of the amount of rinks that are available to our residents across the city, and when there are residents volunteering to make it happen, not being able to actually go forward and do that. So thank you for your consideration. And a seconder would be Councillor Jackson.
For the children.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question for your natural ice rink?
You have to pass the chair.
Through the chair. I'm the chair. Okay. Who would like to take the chair? Councillor Jackson.
Thanks for appointing me. Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is the natural ice rink the same as the watered down one, where it's
it's a non-refrigerated ice rink.
It's not. That's
yeah,
what I
it's the
wanted to
kind
know.
where the community gets together and makes
Okay.
it happen. Yeah.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pauls?
Yes.
Through you.
We're for the kids.
For the kids.
There's no refrigeration.
I love the watered down one. Yours. Oh my goodness. I go there all the time. Okay. All right. I vote it. I
And that vote carries 11-0.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Nan, 12.4, please.
Thank
Read
you,
the
through you,
motion.
Vice Chair. Next up is a basketball court improvements at Powell Park, 53 Birch Avenue in Ward 3. And this one, I do want to read the whereases into the record because there is a lot of community engagement and involvement in making this happen, and I want to document it. So whereas Powell Park, 53 Birch Avenue in Hamilton was once home to a complete basketball court facility with 2 nets and backboards until the 1990s, when it served as a dynamic community space for friendly competition, gameplay, and gathering among neighbors and friends after school and on weekends. And whereas basketball provides a routine, purpose, and fosters community among young residents and newcomers alike, many who want to contribute to community space in Powell Park, whereas the removal of the second hoop has led to this court not being used properly and discourages kids from enjoying the purpose of play. And whereas Powell Park is slated for reconstruction with consultation beginning in 2024, and residents have requested a temporary restoration of the basketball court to include 2 nets, and whereas a full basketball court will allow kids to play better, build confidence, and further develop their skills to use on and off court, and whereas city staff have assessed the feasibility of installing a second basketball net and backboard and recommended installing fencing to prevent the basketballs from impacting the pathway. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the installation of the second basketball net and additional court fencing at Powell Park Basketball Court be funded from the Ward 3 Special Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund 3302-109300 with an upset limit of $10,000. That's it. Be approved. And B, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to approve and execute all of the required documents. And if I can, through you, Vice Chair, I want to give a special shout out to residents in the Powell Park area who have been working very closely with citizens, residents, newcomers alike in restoring inclusion and safety and community at Powell Park. My colleagues from the last term will remember that I've commented very many times about the increased incidences of hate, specifically racism, in Powell Park. And over the last year and a half, we've been putting in small investments to reanimate the space and, most importantly, support a conducive environment for active use of a municipal facility. It has resulted in an incredible amount of young people using the park again. We're seeing so much more positivity in the community as a result of it. And anytime children can lay claim to their space and use it for play, it's hard to get in the way of that. And so big thanks out to Vince and the folks at Stack Basketball League who've been avid supporters of getting this done and also being there for the kids and in active mentorship and helping kids build their confidence and both on court and off court. So there it is.
Thank you.
No.
No. Thank you, Councillor, and great job. It is for the kids.
For her kids.
For her kids.
Thank you.
All right. So there's the, okay, Councillor.
Last one, it's, oh, no, sorry.
Ted, thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Okay.
For the kids.
For the kids. Okay, Councillor Nan, 12.6, please read your motion.
So this is crime prevention through environmental design review of city-owned escarpment staircases, and it was put forward as a notice of motion previous Public Works Committee. So committee is aware of it, and it's moved by myself, and
I would love to second it.
That there's two councillors who want to second it now.
That's fine.
Councillor Crutch's resident is actually one of the ones delegated also on this issue and have been asking for it. So if you're okay, Councillor Pauls,
no problem.
Councillor Crutch will be seconder. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you the chair back.
Thank you. Okay, that takes care of motions. Now over to notices of motion. First up is 13.1, playground improvements at Henry and Beatrice Warden Park at 55 Lake Avenue North in Ward 5. Councillor Francis isn't here right now. Did he pass on delegated duties?
Chair Nan, Councillor Francis indicated to me that between himself and Parks Manager Bunn, this can wait for 2 weeks until he
Fantastic.
returns. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Okay, so
Point 2 as well.
13.1 and 13.2 will remain as notices of motion, which I appreciate. Over to 13.3, which is the Ottawa Street North and Maple Avenue pedestrian crossing, which is also staying as a notice of motion.
The chair, are you going to read the motion?
I just said that it's remaining as a notice of motion. And then that takes us over to clerk. Are there other notices of motion? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Councillor A. Wilson and Councillor Kretsch have notices of motion.
Okay, Councillor A. Wilson, and then I think there was also one from my office as well. Clerk.
So, yeah, I've got my notice of motion. If Councillor Wilson doesn't mind if I go first, because I'm going to leave.
Oh, right, I forgot about that. You're leaving. Go, Councillor Kretsch.
Yeah, it'd be great if I had it right in front of me. That I would seem like I knew what I was doing. Yeah, just a moment. Yeah, it's about waste pickup for large community cleanups. We got there. And I don't have the whereas statements prepared for as yet, but the motion itself will be that city staff report back to the May 15th, 2023 meeting of the Public Works Committee on what would be needed to ensure that the city can fully support waste pickup for large community events, including the need for safety equipment and training, which I put in all caps for no good reason. But yeah, that's the short motion. It's going to stay as a notice of motion, just so you know, just so it's into the record and people know what it's going to be, but it'll stay as a notice of motion for now, and staff will report back in May 15th if it's approved. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And off to your meeting you go. And over to you, Councillor A. Wilson. Your notice of motion, please.
Thank you. So folks who have done their agenda review have already seen this. It's just on Wednesday's GIC agenda. We're going to move this over to today because this is what's Public Works staff doing the work, and they're going to be reporting back to Public Works. So this is a notice of motion following up on the delegation we heard from Angela Zhang about the Grant Boulevard stairs today. Just seeking direction from the clerk if reading out all the whereases is necessary, or if just the therefore be it resolves is what we need. Cool. So two therefore be it resolves, just one small edit to one of them. And the first is that the Corporate Real Estate Office be authorized and directed to negotiate the requisite agreements between the City of Hamilton and the Hamilton Conservation Authority to permit the city to design, construct, and maintain a new set of stairs on HCA property located at the end of Grant Boulevard, and report back to the Public Works Committee for approval is the one change there, and then that Public Works staff be directed to determine the budget and work to design, construct, and maintain a new set of stairs on the Hamilton Conservation Authority property located at the end of Grant Boulevard, and report back to Public Works for approval. So again, no money being spent, just doing some of the studies so we can get to a point where we have a plan in front of us.
And Councillor Wilson, are you seeking to place that now, or it remains as a notice?
No, we're hoping to get this actually a motion at next Public Works.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair.
Oh, my apologies. General Manager?
Yep, so through the chair to the councillor, staff have informed me because this is a legal agreement, it should go to GIC as opposed to Public Works.
Got it.
If we can do it as a notice today and save ourselves some 5 minutes at GIC re-notice, nope, we cannot.
You can't table a notice of motion in a committee to another committee.
Then we'll see you all at Wednesday.
All
You're
right,
primed and ready to go.
Thank you. And then the final notice of motion stemming from today's committee delegations will be maintenance and beautification of Birch Avenue Green Space Gardens, looking to allocate some matching funds to enable the maintenance for this year, as well as direction to staff for future years. That will also remain as a notice of motion until next committee. So that then takes care of our notice motions portion of the agenda. And on to general information and other business. Amendments to the outstanding business list, 14.1. There's a lot of amendments there. Anybody want to move and second them? Moved by Councillor A. Wilson, seconded by Councillor M. Wilson. Any discussion? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval. Positive, vote in the positive by Councillor McMeekin. That carried? Thank you. On to adjournment. If there's no general information, other business. Councillor Francis isn't here to move adjournment, so I don't know what we're going to do. Councillor A. Wilson, seconded by Councillor Cassar. Thank you both. And thank you to all staff in preparation for the reports and support for today's meeting.
Good, successful meeting, Chair Nan.
Thank you.
Still daylight.
It is still daylight. I missed my 4:30 appointment, but that's okay. And that carried.